And we are live. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Unfiltered Report. My name is Ryan. Without further ado, without wasting any further time, we are going to do the best as physically possible. Obviously, as we come on and said many times before, it's impossible to talk about everything in one full go. You have to add things to it as it goes. This one, probably more than any other that's ever been done, will go all over the place until the next one, of course, which will go even further all over the place than this one. And then, as we also have said many times before, there's nothing or a rule that says you can't talk about something more than once. All of which is to say that we are going to do the best again as physically possible to recap the draft, the NBA draft specifically. Not only the draft picks that happened, we'll go in and we'll talk about some of the trades that have happened, not only on draft day regarding draft picks, but or I should say draft days because they split it up into 2 days. And then there was a big trade after Armand and I chopped it up the other day, which him and I had talked about that, but off the record. We forgot to put that on the record, but to see it actually happen because it was just a rumor when we first started talking about it, when we first saw the rumblings, which I guess we should have just rolled with it. We would have been prophetic. We could have been spreading rumors like we had inside information. Maybe we do. You never know. Uh, hint, hint, wink, wink. But anyways, gonna do the best as possible to recap the draft and then talk. Just go team by team. Really, even some teams that didn't have draft picks. I know in other places, one of the popular things that they love to do is like winners and losers or draft grades. You're not going to get any of that from me. So if you're looking for that, you got to go someplace else. Rather, what you will get, um, again, all 30 teams, whether they had draft picks or not, or multiple, the undrafted portion of it, with the look ahead a little bit to Summer League without the full Summer League rosters, but we'll continue to update that. Again, as I said, it won't be the only time we talk about it. Obviously, during Summer League, we'll talk about that a lot, and in the off season. But we'll talk about the things that have happened, forecast a little bit about what could happen, what might happen. And I think without any particular order, I think my true feelings will come out regardless of the order. So don't necessarily look too much into the order of where it goes, although there is a slight there's a little bit of a direction where we want to start, obviously, but as I mentioned, to go all over the place. So that might be some teams that I don't necessarily talk about immediately, but just because it maybe talk about them like 15th or 20th doesn't mean I necessarily feel that way. It's just the order in which it'll go. So I think the true feelings will come out in every which way. But as is the case with any discussion, you have to start somewhere. And I don't think people want to listen to me yammer and, riff too much. Well, maybe they do. Who knows? But here we are, 4 minutes in, give or take. We're going to get it cracking here. So what I'd like to do is we've talked a lot about a lot of these teams, but I want to take it to another level. Really get all basketball degenerate and at least set the stage for future basketball degeneracy. Because you can never get enough basketball or any of these sports really. Um, but we've talked a lot about the Wizards and the Jazz. We'll come back to them. Uh, Before we go any further, actually, on the subject of just the way that my brain works and how this goes, as mentioned, I think when we did the NFL draft recap, we started with the Browns and with the Dolphins because I felt that those two teams were the perfect place to start. So slightly similar to that, but a little different because the team that I'd like to start with is the Memphis Grizzlies, and I'd like to take that and expand it further, um, and just kind of go down the list as best as possible and fill in the gaps from there. We talked a lot again about the Wizards and the Jazz. We've talked a lot about the teams that'll come after the Grizzlies. But I feel like the Grizzlies are an appropriate place to start because they were active outside of the third pick that they had. Um, and I think we talked about it with Armand a while back during one of the great tanking controversies of 2026. In my opinion, the way I saw it, heading in long before the draft process and the draft combine and all that, with the draft lottery, the way I saw it was, and again, I can only speak for myself. I figured the Wizards and the Jazz at 1 and 2, even if they didn't get the first and the second pick, they were going to be really dangerous next season, in this upcoming season, moving onwards. And nothing has changed, in my opinion, of that. I think both, the Wizards going with AJ DeBonce and the Jazz with Darren Peterson doesn't surprise me. The Wizards also added Felix Okpara in the second round. We'll also talk about the undrafted free agents as we go. Might do that a little separately than we did with the NFL, which you'll see that in a short second here. But the way I saw it was Memphis at 3. Memphis is another team I'm really looking forward to, and not only in the short term but in the long term. I think Memphis has one of the brightest futures in the entire NBA landscape. There's been a lot of propaganda out there in other publications and places about how Memphis is not an NBA city and they should move to Nashville and nobody wants to play in Memphis. There's nothing to do in Memphis, yada, yada, yada. Um, and then at the end of this recording, by the way, there will be a conversation that I'm looking forward to that has nothing to do with the draft or with the offseason, but we'll set the stage for our next episode or the next episode, I guess that'll be just me by myself yammering without any of the other beautiful stars of the Unfiltered Report. Shout out to them. But that'll set the stage for something that is goes way bigger than basketball. But with the Grizzlies, you go back to the grit and grind Grizzlies way back when, with Zach Randolph and Marc Gasol, Mike Conley, and those were some really fun teams. And they had different iterations of those over the years. And then they took their lumps and they came out of that with John Morant, Jaren Jackson Jr., Desmond Bain. They had Dylan Brooks once upon a time. And things were really looking up for the Grizzlies. A couple of years back, they had, they were on that trajectory path of one of the brightest teams in the league. And you thought, well, hey, these guys are only just getting started. And, it didn't necessarily pan out that way for them. But I think that shouldn't be misconstrued with them not doing the smart thing. And that's why I want to start with the Memphis Grizzlies because I think Memphis is a perfect example of something you don't always see in professional sports and really in society, which is being as proactive as possible and for making decisions that a lot of other organizations would have kicked the can down the road. They did the opposite. And I want to emphasize that further because a lot of times you see in sports, I mean, Armand and I talked about it the other day with Milwaukee and the Giannis thing. Obviously, two different situations, but a lot of times when teams have players that they're young, they've had a little bit of success, whatever it may be. They have the media value and the name value, or they have the entertainment aspect of it, which I'm the first to say. To me, sports is not entertainment. If it happens to be entertaining, great. But going back to those grit and grind Grizzlies, like you're not there for entertainment. You're there to compete. And now, granted, those teams never had the ceiling, maybe, but they always had it. They were always tough to play, and we'll get to that with other teams. And then you thought with the John Morant, Jaren Jackson Jr., Desmond Bain iteration, you thought, well, okay, these guys, their ceiling is higher than that other ceiling. They never had the ceiling with the grit and grind. They had the ceiling with John Morant and these other guys. And then as quickly of the glimmer that it was there, Dylan Brooks goes to Houston. They let him go. They maybe don't have the immediate success, and then there's the off the court stuff that happens. And next thing you know, what was maybe on a trajectory path, now you're not so sure. And what a lot of organizations would have done is I think they would have been content to say, hey, you know what? Like, we're going to give this core another year and another year and another year. But they did the smart thing. They listen, the haul that they got from Orlando for Desmond Bain, you take that 10 times out of 10. It has nothing to do with Desmond Bain. Desmond Bain's a fine player. He's a great player. Um, a really underrated player. But you absolutely do not turn that deal down. And there's no way that you turn that down. You just don't. Um, and so what that did is something that I don't think a lot of teams would have done. Now, I going back and you're getting 4 unprotected first round picks and a pick swap, one of which ended up being one of the draft picks that we'll get into with the Grizzlies that has after Cam Boozer that they took at 3, which was not a surprise in any form of the slightest. But in trading him now, you go to the Jaren Jackson Jr. trade with Utah a couple months later. This is an 8-player deal. You go out and you get Walter Clayton Jr., who was a first round pick last year. And then on top of that, you had a guy like Taylor Hendricks. Um, and on top of that, you're getting draft picks. You're getting 3 first round picks and a first round guy last year and a young player who was a first round pick for Utah before that. You take that 10 times out of 10. And now, everybody wants to talk about John Morant. Forget John Morant. Whatever happens with that situation, Memphis has as much draft capital as any team in the league. Now, and because of what you've gotten in these other 2 trades, you get what you get. You move on, you keep them, whatever. That doesn't matter. You put yourself in a position to where whether he's on your roster or not, forget John Morant. Everybody's going to want to talk about John Morant. With the Grizzlies, regardless of what they did heading into the draft, you like where they were going. You've got Cedric Coward, who I think has a really high ceiling and could be a really, really good player in the NBA. Somebody who had some really good games before they shut him down at the end of the year. This is a guy I think who's got great two-way potential. He could be a 20 plus point per game guy with rock solid defense on top of that. He's got all-star level talent, 1000%. You go down the list. Another Wazoo guy, Jalen Wells. He can shoot the crap out of the basketball. Really good player. GG Jackson. GG Jackson to me, I think because he was super young when he came into the league. Look, this is a guy who, to me, there are going to be a lot of players we talk about throughout these 30 teams that, like, if you give them the chance to get consistent minutes in an expanded role, they can be great players. And I think GG Jackson's one of those guys. I think he's got a really high ceiling. Um, don't forget about him. I think he's somebody who I think this upcoming season will have a breakout season. And it won't be a surprise necessarily, maybe at least at the way that I look at it, but maybe other people might be surprised. But I think that's coming. I think that GG Jackson's going to be one of the breakout players in the league. Him, Cedric Coward. You've still got Zach Edey, who, if you can get him healthy, can be a really good player. Um, a guy like Santi Aldama's rock solid. Look, this is a good team. Even a guy like Javon Small played pretty well for them. Olivier Maxence Prosper was a first round pick by Dallas. He's a good player. Ryan Rupert. This is a guy who got drafted in the second round by Portland a couple years ago. Has shown some flashes. Uh, Scottie Pippen Jr. That's a talented team. Even without the draft picks. So look, them taking Cam Boozer at 3, no shock. That was expected if he was gonna be there, which I thought he'd be there. Everything kinda went according to script, to be honest with you. Um, as we go down the rest of these teams, there was really no big surprise for the first, X amount of picks. But one of the things that I thought was really interesting about Memphis was we mentioned the fact that with this Desmond Bain trade. So they had pick number 16 as well. At pick number 16, they decided to trade down from 16 to 17 with OKC. And we'll talk about OKC a lot in just a second. OKC, who had a great night, by the way, and the rich get richer. Again, we'll talk about them. So OKC trades up one spot to go from 17 to 16. In that trade, they trade two future second round picks to Memphis to move up one spot. We talk about Memphis and them having about as many assets as anybody. Well, OKC's the cream of the crop. Those two second round picks don't even make a dent. And that we'll get with the OKC later because that's going to be probably a 30, 45-minute conversation. And you just got to tip your cap. The rich get richer. Which another side note, by the way, always blows my mind that the NBA doesn't, and when they have the draft picks, they don't announce it as like it just seems like it's such a common sense thing. Like everybody knows that like those picks are moving around, but then you'll have the player in the hat of the team that they're not going to play for. It never makes sense to me. It's a minute detail that's not really worth ranting about, but it's something that just doesn't really make sense to me. But again, OKC, we'll talk about them a lot. They deserve a lot of love, whether people want to hate on the Thunder or not. And the players that they have or whatnot, you can't hate on what they do as an organization. I got a whole spiel for that. We'll save that. Um, but with Memphis, so they move back one spot from 16 to 17. They get two future second round picks from OKC. Then Detroit comes calling, and Detroit wants pick number 17 to move up from pick 21 to pick 17. In doing that, we're going to talk a lot about Detroit too. Stay tuned for that. It's a long conversation here. Um, Memphis then goes back from 17 to 21 and gets three additional future second round picks from Detroit. So Memphis goes from 16 to 21. They add five second round picks. And then what I thought was hilarious and one of my favorite transactional nuggets in the history of my lifetime, and I think it's ironic that we get to be able to talk about it. So then a day later, Memphis takes three second round picks that were not traded from Detroit to Memphis, and they trade three other second round picks back to Detroit for Isaiah Stewart, who's going to fit in perfectly in Memphis and what they want to do and what they're building. Beef stew. Shout out to him. He's going to fit in great with the culture there and the team that they're trying to build. You see the blueprint, and we're getting there. So they go down five spots. They get five second round picks. They take three additional second round picks that they already had. They take that, they get Isaiah Stewart. Then at pick 21, they get Kareem Lopez, who if they would have taken him at 16 or 17, you would have heard no complaints from me. But you get him at 21, which again, shout out to Detroit and OKC. They've had a fantastic 48 hours. But we're just starting with Memphis. So Memphis going down five spots, getting Kareem Lopez on top of Cam Boozer. Then you're at pick 32, second pick of day two. And, there were maybe some rumblings that maybe they try to trade down from 32. And maybe if they stay there, we'll see who they take. I got a lot of love for the second round. We're going to do that in the undrafted guys. But what Memphis does, Memphis got a lot of players. They got a lot of players and not enough roster spots. So what do? They take Richie Saunders. We talked about him a little bit the other day. Richie Saunders is not necessarily a draft and stash, which we got a conversation for that coming too. A lot of. It's going to be a long recording, baby. It's going to be a blast. But Memphis takes Richie Saunders, who they can take their time with. They can basically redshirt him, have his, have him in the program essentially, and take your time in being able to get him on the active roster. Um, Obviously, I'm sure they hey, look, he's going to be a part of the team, but you can redshirt him. You can take your time with Richie Saunders. So all in all, Memphis goes in, they draft Cam Boozer. We will continue to talk about Cam Boozer. Cam Boozer is awesome. Cam Boozer is going to be a spectacular NBA player. Couldn't be more convinced with that. And he's a fantastic player that fits into what they've got, and he's going to be an outstanding basketball player. Don't really think that's going out on a limb, but if it happens to be, I couldn't be more confident in that. And then they also add Carson Cooper out of Michigan State on a two-way. They bring in Brendan Housen to the summer league team, who's a shooter, and then Zach Cleveland out of Liberty, who's a fun little jack of all trades player on an Exhibit 10 contract. And for those of you who don't know what Exhibit 10 contract is, an Exhibit 10 contract is a contract that can be signed anytime from July 1st to the last day before the regular season starts. It is a non-guaranteed minimum salary deal that assures a player of a bonus, which is going to be up to a projected 91,000 if they get waived, but then spend at least 60 days with that team's G League affiliate. But Exhibit 10s can also be converted to a two-way contract. So teams get 3 two-way contracts each. That's a separate can of worms. But on an Exhibit 10, you have the ability to get either converted from an Exhibit 10 to a two-way, or if you get waived, you can remain on the G League affiliate of that team and get that $91,000 bonus if you stay with that G League affiliate and potentially earn a two-way slot down the line after you play in the G League. So basically, short story short, what an Exhibit 10 does is it gets your foot in the door. A lot of the guys that we're going to talk about in the next however long this conversation ends up being, they might not be immediately on a two-way, but I will project that I think certain players moving forward, as we talk about the undrafted guys on Exhibit 10s, will find their way onto a two-way and then potentially even onto the standard roster promoted from a two-way. So stay tuned for that as well. But all in all, with Memphis, I think what they were able to do, you get a foundational building block in Cam Boozer, someone who can come in, can help you continue to build on what you've got. You add 5 second-round picks. You flip 3 separate picks that are not from the 5 that you've added. You bring in Isaiah Stewart. You add Kareem Lopez, so you get 5 second-round picks to move down 5 spots. You get a guy in Kareem Lopez who's got a really high ceiling. You bring in a guy in Richie Saunders, who once he gets right and healthy is going to be a winning player for you. Richie Saunders might never be an all-star or anything like that, but it doesn't matter. He could be a really good pro. And then on top of that, on a two-way, you bring in a guy in Carson Cooper, who, again, maybe not the highest ceiling in the world, but this is a guy, look, if you play for Tom Izzo, you can play basketball. And, he had a really good career under Tom Izzo. So rock solid. Bringing him in on a two-way, and then we'll see what happens as they fill out their summer league roster and whatnot. We'll continue to come in and update that, and what they do in the offseason. But I just think a perfect place to start is Memphis. I think they're building something really, really smooth there. I see the vision of what they are building, and I give them a lot of credit for moving on from Jaren Jackson Jr. and Desmond Bain, not because they're bad players, but you're being proactive. You're doing what's best for your organization in the long term. And I think this current crop of guys that they have already has a higher ceiling than anything that they would have done with that previous core of Morant, Jaren Jackson Jr., and Desmond Bain. And on top of that, you've got one of the best future outlooks of draft picks with a lot of first round picks coming up, a lot of second rounders. They've got a lot of flexibility. So I just think people out there, do not sleep on Memphis. They might not get a lot of love from other places, but they're gonna get a lot of love here, and I think they can have some immediate success too. They might look, are they gonna win a championship next season? That's not what we're saying, but look, it's a new age of the NBA. It's a new era. It's none of that. Can they, I'm so glad it's none of that bullshit from back in the day of like, oh man, they're gonna win a championship. Well, yeah, you know what? They can. They really can. Keep an eye on them. They're gonna be in the thick of the thing. In a couple of years, they're gonna be a team that nobody's gonna want to play. And I think they'll be competitive this upcoming season too. I think again, a lot of really good young players. I can't wait to see what these guys do at summer league, and then what they're able to do this upcoming season. But look, Cam Boozer's going to be a stud. There's nothing this guy can't do. Um, he can score, he can rebound, he can pass, he can shoot, he can defend. His brain is off the charts, his IQ on the court. He does all the little things that add up to a great player. And on top of that, he gives you the production. He's a rare combination of both. It'll blow my mind why this guy is seemingly forgotten in the shuffle, in a conversation pre-draft in a lot of places. And I think a lot of people look at him as like a high floor guy. This guy's got an incredible ceiling. I think he's going to be an incredible NBA player, and he adds into what's already a really talented team. Kareem Lopez got a really high ceiling. Perfect place for him to end up with Memphis. And I want to see these two guys together in summer league. I'm looking forward to that. So we could talk a lot about Memphis today. We'll continue to talk about them, but initially, my thoughts there, I give them a lot of credit. They a lot of teams would have stuck with Jaren Jackson Jr. and Desmond Bain and just and then they wouldn't have panned out for a couple more years, and then they wouldn't have been able to get much in return for them. But what they do, get 8 first-round picks and the young players on top of it. Brilliant business by Memphis. I love what they're doing. And again, this has nothing to do with, I haven't even mentioned John Morant. Like, forget John Morant. Whether they keep him, whether they don't, all these other guys are worth monitoring. Um, so I can't wait to see what happens with them. But then moving on to the Chicago Bulls. Look, the Chicago Bulls are a team on and off the record. I've given a hard time. I've given them a hard time, especially in the last couple of years. Um, Look, ownership group. There was a big thing that came out. They actually two of the Waltons, the Walton family, different Waltons, but Walton family. They bought a little bit of a stake in the Bulls before this recording. So that's something we're going to talk about ownership wise. There's a lot of ownership conversations we're going to continue to have. But look, we've given a lot of shit to the Reinsdorf ownership group. But credit where it's due, not necessarily even to the ownership group, but look, the White Sox outlook's looking great. We'll talk about baseball. Also, worth mentioning that while we're talking about the NBA draft, the NHL draft is going on. So we're going to come in and do our best to recap the NHL draft. Don't want to forget about that, and we haven't forgot about the World Cup either. We got some bigger conversations coming throughout the rest of that tournament. So that feels, got to plug that in there. Not oblivious to the fact that the NHL draft is going on. So we try to be locked in as many places as possible. So we try to do here at the Unfiltered Report. That's why these conversations go all over the place. We try to give love in as many different places as we can. We try to talk about things as objectively as possible. And that's where I try to say with the Chicago Bulls. Look, I've been hard on the Bulls. I've been hard on the ownership group, but credit where it's due. Arturas Karnisovas, that moment came and went. They bring in a new ownership group and not ownership group, new general manager and Bryson Graham. They end up bringing in Tiago Splitter, who was the interim with Portland. They end up hiring Tiago Splitter, which I'm very fascinated to see what happens there with Tiago Splitter, because look, Tiago Splitter did a great job with Portland. Um, I think not enough people have given enough credit to a guy who came in and took over for a team whose head coach got arrested by the FBI. Like, you got to think about that for a second and let that marinate. Like, this is a guy who, in the middle of a season, took over for a team that's head coach got arrested for gambling and like an undercover gambling probe and playing illegal rigged card games and whatnot. and not only kept them afloat, but got them into the playoffs. I think not enough credit has been given to Tiago Splitter for that. And I think he earned the right to be a head coach next season. And I'm actually glad for his sake. We have something at the end with Portland. That's going to be the end. I said there was no direction of where we are going to start. We're going to end with Portland, and it's going to connect to the whole ownership thing. We kind of talked about it a little bit, but we're going to add a piece to it, which I'm looking forward to, and it'll set the stage for future episodes that have nothing to do with the NBA on the court, at least. So that's something for the people to look forward to at the end of this recording. If you want to fast forward to the end of it, we haven't gotten there yet, but if you don't want to hear anything else, you can fast forward to that at the end. For the attention span folk out there, shout out to you guys. I think going back to a vast wasteland, I know the people out there got the attention span. I know we do. But again, going back to Chicago, you're bringing in Tiago Splitter. I'm very interested to see what Tiago Splitter can do, not only with the full season, but in a different organization to be able to come in and see what that looks like with the different set of players. And we'll see if there's any differences from what he did in Portland to what he does in Chicago. So that's a very interesting component that I want to see. But it's very early. But I want to give a lot of love to Bryson Graham, similar to what we did with Memphis, but separately. Again, going back to that draft lottery, pre-draft combine conversation that we were having earlier. Again, we're going all over the place here. If you would have asked me, I would have said those top three teams, I think they've got three of the brightest futures in the league. And then after the draft lottery, we came on here and we said it, but we'll say it now again. We'll repeat ourselves, going back to the beginning as well. So it goes all over the place. I said Chicago and the Clippers were going to be the two happiest teams in the entire NBA draft lottery process. And they were going to be thanking their lucky stars that they were able to move up in the manner that they did. Chicago moving up 2-4, and then Indiana losing their pick in the Zubac trade, and that pick conveying to the Clippers. And we're going to get to the Clippers, but while we're on the subject of that, you're not going to find a bigger Ivica Zubac guy than me. I've been banging that drum for a long time. When the Lakers drafted him, I was spreading Ivica Zubac propaganda in my brain before the Unfiltered Report ever existed. And when they traded him for Mike Muscala, I thought it was one of the dumbest trades in the history of sports. And I think that proved out to be pretty accurate. But again, similar to what Memphis did with Desmond Bane and Jaren Jackson Jr. It's nothing against those players. Again, nothing against Ivica Zubac. Like, we'll get to Utah later. Jaren Jackson Jr. is going to be in a perfect spot with the Jazz. Desmond Bane is a great player. Ivica Zubac is spectacular. But the Clippers, already getting Ben Mathurin and Isaiah Jackson would have been one thing. But you're getting Keaton Wagler, who I'm going to be spreading all kinds of Keaton Wagler propaganda in just a second. And then with the Bulls, Caleb Wilson. Look, so far, 5 picks in, really no surprises of who took who. No complaints, no surprises, no controversy. And that's why I wanted to start with Memphis, Chicago, and the Clippers. Those are the 3 teams I wanted to start with because I think it's the perfect place to then take it to the rest of the draft, which there are some teams that I think had just as good, if not better drafts than these 3 teams. But these 3 teams are the perfect place to start. We started with Memphis. But this is where we get into the caveat, and we go back to Chicago and the Clippers. I think I can make the argument to you that the Bulls and the Clippers had 2 of, if not the best drafts of anybody. And they made the slam dunk pick at 4 and 5. It was, you don't, that's a layup. That's a dunk. You don't miss that. The Bulls, when they moved up to 4, I mean, they had to be on their hands and knees kissing themselves, saying, "Holy smokes, we moved up and we get Caleb Wilson." I mean, you run to the podium and you take Caleb Wilson. And then the Clippers, you run to the podium, you say nobody's taking Keaton Wagler. We're going to take Keaton Wagler. Keaton Wagler could be a number 1 pick in most years. Let me just put that on the record. Caleb Wilson's a number 1 pick most years, whether they get drafted 1 or not. These 2 guys are going to be two of the best players in the NBA, in my opinion. And I think these two guys are going to be from game one to 82. And whatever happens, whether these teams make the playoffs or not this upcoming season, how many games these guys play, watch these two dudes in summer league and Cam Boozer and Peterson and DeBonce and all these other guys. But watch these guys. I mean, they are incredible players. Doesn't, whether you get fourth or fifth or whatever, look, spectacular basketball players. Slam dunk pick. So again, going back to the Bulls before we go to the Clippers, because these two are going to overlap a little bit. It's like a Venn diagram. There's an overlap, and then they got differences here. So on the subject of the Bulls, okay, Caleb Wilson, there's no controversy. I think Caleb Wilson, I love Caleb Wilson, and I love Keaton Walker, but Caleb Wilson could be one of the best players in the NBA, in very short order here on both sides of the floor. What this guy's able to do offensively, defensively. I mean, this guy's. I mean, I don't know how this guy. It looks like he never runs out of energy. He's one of those guys. I think he could be one of those guys I think could lead the league in minutes in 5 years. Minutes played and minutes per game. Like, I think this guy's going to be one of those guys who's going to play 38, 48 minutes, 38, 40 minutes if you let him. It just seems like he never runs out of energy. He's constantly doing all the, I mean, whether it's picking up guys full court, getting into them defensively, he's a menace on the glass. He's got the ability to block shots. He's got the ability to get into passing lanes and steal the ball. He's got incredible length, athleticism. Offensively, I think his offensive potential is unlimited. I think he could be one of the best offensive players in the league. Even if he never develops as an offensive player, his defense is going to be incredible. But offensively, to me, this is a guy, it blows my mind the way some people talk about this guy. I think offensively, the sky's the limit with this dude. I think he could average 20 points a game right off the rip with 10 rebounds. And same thing with Cam Boozer, by the way. I think both of these guys, they do it in different ways. If Cam Boozer does it where maybe he's not running the fastest, he's not jumping the highest, it looks like he's not exerting a whole lot of energy and he's like, 3 steps ahead of everybody. Caleb Wilson's going to get you to the same place in a much different way. He's helter-skelter. He's all over the place. He's going 100 miles an hour. He's got the ability. And these guys, when they went against each other, they both, Caleb Wilson might have been, it's just a preference thing. These guys are both incredible. Caleb Wilson gave it to Cam Boozer, and, Cam Boozer's National Player of the Year. So these are two spectacular basketball players. I think Caleb Wilson, if he didn't get hurt and he got to play, in the NCAA tournament, listen, he's an amazing player. And whether he played in the tournament or not doesn't matter to me. This is a guy who's got a great mid-range. He's got the ability to dunk the crap out of the basketball, get to the paint. I think the three-point shot's going to be there. I wouldn't worry about it. I think he's going to be a 3-level scorer with the ability to get to the foul line. He's going to be somebody that's going to get after you defensively. He's going to do it all, man. He's a player that the Bulls have been begging for such a long time, and they're on their hands and knees thinking, how the hell did we get this guy? I think that's a culture change player. That's a tone setter. That's somebody who's going to come in. And look, they've got some players, by the way, mind you, before Arturas Karnisovas went out the door. Ironically, I thought Arturas made some of his best moves before he got fired, ironically. Him being able to go out and get Leonard Miller, Rob Dillingham, and all those second rounders for Io Dosunmu. They flipped off of Kobe White. They traded Vucevic. Look, Leonard Miller is a guy. I've been waiting for Leonard Miller to have an expanded run. It feels like for years when he was with the T-Wolves. When we talk about Summer League, every year during Summer League, there would be a part of me that would die inside because I would watch Leonard Miller in Summer League. You watch him in the G League. He just needs an opportunity. He goes to the Bulls. He played really well after the trade deadline. I think Leonard Miller, to be honest with you, when we get to the T-Wolves, I think the T-Wolves wish they had Leonard Miller right about now, although I love what the T-Wolves are doing too. And we're going to talk about the T-Wolves and the Hornets and that big trade. I love what both of those teams are doing. I can't wait to talk about that. which is why I said the order doesn't matter. We're going to talk about all of it. But yeah, look, Rob Dillingham's a guy who was drafted in the top 10. Um, Josh Giddey, look, Matas Buzelis. Don't forget about him. We talked about guys like G.G. Jackson, Cedric Coward. Look, I think Matas Buzelis, I think he's a guy who's going to take a huge leap. He's shown some flashes. I think he's going to be a really good basketball player at the NBA level. I think Tiago Splitter. I can't wait to see what Tiago Splitter does with this group of guys. You've also got a guy who was a first rounder last year, Noah Essengay, who really didn't get the chance to play at all. So you want to see what he can do with the clean bill of health. Uh, Chicago, we talked about Caleb Wilson. Look, I want to talk about in giving love to Bryson Graham. Look, I think anybody, I want to give love to what they did outside of Caleb Wilson. So they had pick 15. That pick, ironically, came from Portland. Um, I love the Dalen Swain pick. We've talked a little bit about Dalen Swain in the past. We're going to continue to talk about him. The fact that you get not only Dalen Swain or Caleb Wilson, but both of those guys together is remarkable. Dalen Swain, to me, I love that they took him at 15. I tip my cap to Bryson Graham. That's an excellent pick. Dalen Swain, to me, is going to be a two-way menace, similar to Caleb Wilson, but different body types, different ways of doing it. But Dalen Swain can rebound the heck out of the basketball. We're going to get to Keyshawn Big Guard Hall later. Look, Dalen Swain is a big guard, man. These two guys on the wings, I can't wait to watch these guys in Summer League together and what they can do on both ends of the floor. Look, Dalen Swain can score. He can get to the foul line. Both of these guys are two-way players. They're going to be able to really give it to you on both ends. I think these are foundational building blocks. And I think – not to get ahead of, but you've got, again, you have the ability to trot out something in a little bit of due time here. And, before you know it, you're looking at Giddey, Dalen Swain, Bruce Ellis, Caleb Wilson. You get Nick Claxton and the Julius Randle trade, which we're going to talk about that with the Timberwolves and the Hornets. Look, early dividends for me from Bryson Graham. I love what I'm seeing. That's a really interesting squad with Leonard Miller, Rob Dillingham, Trey Jones. That's a fun team. And I'm excited to see what Tiago Splitter can do with these guys because this is the most optimistic you would be if you're a Bulls fan in years. I think if you're a Bulls fan, you are thanking your lucky stars that they found a way to get Caleb Wilson, Dalen Swain. And then I also want to mention in the second round, they make a trade with Indiana. And that trade, they trade out of their second round pick, which that pick was pick number 38. They trade that to the Pacers. We'll talk about the Pacers. We mentioned them with the Clippers trade with Zubac and Keaton Wagler. So it's funny how these things kind of go full circle a little bit. They connect all over the place. So in this trade, credit where it's due, the Bulls, they get they get cash considerations, they get future second round pick swaps, and they get Cam Jones from the Pacers, who the Pacers drafted him in the second round last year. Let's see if the Bulls keep Cam Jones or not. I know Bryson Graham said they're still in the process of figuring that out. Time will tell. But we'll get to the Pacers aspect of it with Braden Smith in due time, and what the Pacers were able to do, and obviously Zubac. You have to look at it from that lens as well. They trade Ben Mathurin, Isaiah Jackson, and Keaton Wagler for Ivica Zubac, which is a lot. So with the Bulls, they do that, but then I want to give love to what they did in the undrafted sphere here. We mentioned two-way contracts and we mentioned exhibit 10 contracts. So I guess now would be a good way to explain what a two-way contract is in the NBA. So a two-way contract, each team gets up to 3 of these. And so you get 15 roster spots and you get up to 3 two-way guys. So with these two-way guys, You may have 3 players under two-way contracts who can be active for up to 50 games with their NBA team. They are paid one salary for their time in both leagues. It's typically about half of what a second round pick makes. As I mentioned, this is an ever evolving conversation. So this won't be the only time we talk about it because we'll come in here in a couple of days and we'll mention some of the players that end up getting signed to that second round pick exception and which second round picks end up on two ways. And then we'll also tonight and throughout the rest of the offseason, we'll update the players that are on two ways already before the draft, players that have been subsequently released from their two-way contracts. For example, a guy like Tosan Ebuam, he gets released from his two-way contract with the Hornets, and the Hornets go in and sign Michael Ajayi to a two-way contract. I can't wait to talk about the Hornets and the Timberwolves. So stay tuned for that. But going back to that undrafted sphere that we mentioned with the two-way contracts, so the Bulls heading into 48 hours ago, they had all three of their two-way slots occupied. Yuki Kawamura, Mac McClung, Lachlan Olbrich, who was somebody that they also acquired uh, this past season. But I love what Chicago did. Chicago goes in, and one of the guys we talked about after the NBA G League draft combine, somebody that I can't believe didn't get the beat in the NBA draft combine, Jalen Sellers on a two-way. I love that. Jalen Sellers with Dalen Swain and Caleb Wilson at NBA Summer League. Oh boy, I can't wait to watch that. We'll see if they bring any of the other guys from last year. We'll see maybe even Matas Buzelis might play. You never know. I cannot wait to see all these teams in Summer League. I can't wait to talk about Summer League every day after each day of Summer League games. But Jalen Sellers to be on a two-way, credit to Bryson Graham. Brilliant signing. I think Jalen Sellers is going to find his way onto that team on a standard contract in due time. I think he's going to ball out in Summer League with Dalen Swain and Caleb Wilson. Look, things are looking up for the Bulls for the first time in a long time. Credit where it's due. Um, and it's early, but I like what Bryson Graham is doing here as the general manager. And I want to see now what the vision is from front office down to Tiago Splitter and what Tiago Splitter with a full offseason, what type of system do they run with the Bulls? How does that look like compared to what he was doing in Portland? How much of that was just as an interim? Keeping them afloat? Are there stylistic contrasts? Because I think he's got an ability with the Chicago Bulls to take a little bit of what they had with the Blazers, which was one of those low ceiling, maybe not low ceiling, but like a high floor, competitive, rock solid defense. They've got the ability to get after you defensively, but maybe in ways that Portland wasn't able to last year. They got the ability to go out and run with Giddy, Dalen Swain, Caleb Wilson, you a guy like Jalen Sellers now on a two-way. Uh, you go down the list. Leonard Miller's a gazelle too. I love watching Leonard Miller, and I want to see Leonard Miller get the opportunity to start the season for the Chicago Bulls if possible. I think him and Caleb Wilson could be a really fun. Again with Dalen Swain and Matas Buzelis, Nick Claxton, they're going to have the ability to get after you defensively, get out and run. I'm excited, man. I think, Chicago, and you can't talk about Chicago too without, again, rest in peace to Stacey King. Stacey King and Adam Amin together, those guys made Bulls games worth watching when the Bulls were ass and mediocre these past couple of years. Bulls games will not be the same without Stacey King. Rest in peace to Stacey King. Thoughts and prayers to his family. And on the subject of thoughts and prayers too, there was those two big earthquakes in Venezuela. So want to pay respects there. Devastating earthquakes, and to all the people out there being affected by war, genocide, the inability to eat. Any tragedy is a tragedy, and I hope that we can continue to have those conversations on here, because we as human beings should always be looking out for each other, and you never want to see the loss of life in any capacity, but especially when it's preventable, whether it's through just clean water and clean food, access to healthcare and medicine and modern medicines, and uh, whether it's exposure to toxic chemicals, um, or things that we breathe in our day to day, whether it's war and the loss of innocent lives, or the genocide of people just because of where they live, or the color of their skin, or their religion. These are all tragedies, and we should never lose sight of that. And as much as we want to come on here and talk about sports, we want to talk about these things as well. um, but just had to throw that in there. So thoughts and prayers to everybody out there that's being affected by all these terrible things. And going back to the Bulls, prayers up to Stacey King's family. We'll not be able to watch Bulls games the same without Stacey King, but I know Stacey King is going to be watching somewhere in the universe, and is going to really, he's going to be having, they're going to, it would be, the Bulls are going to be a team I think Stacey King would have loved to watch calling games, and I think he will enjoy that. The spirit will live on. So look, the Bulls, first time in a long time. We've bashed them a lot on here and off the record, but I think things are looking up for them. I got to give credit where it's due. I like what they're building so far, and I want to see what they continue to do, and I want to see these guys in summer league. Now, moving on to the Clippers, Keaton Wagler. Can't say enough good things about Keaton Wagler. I don't even want to go into the player comparisons because I don't like player comparisons. I think Keaton Wagler is Keaton Wagler, but just his ability at his size with his frame. I know he'll fill out his frame, but I think he won't lose. He'll add muscle to that frame, but that frame is part of what makes him a special prospect and a special player. I cannot wait to watch this dude with the Clippers. I think he's in the perfect spot. To me, I think Keaton Wagler is going to be one of the best players in the NBA in due time. He's such a joy to watch. What he's able to do at the size that he has and the frame that he has, to be able to get to his spots. We mentioned kind of Cam Boozer plays at his own pace as a big. Keaton Wagler does that as a guard version. All the best guards and the best players in the NBA have the unique ability to get to their spots, whether, and they do it in different ways, whether it's SGA, or Jalen Brunson, or a guy, anybody. You go down the list. How they do it in different ways. Some of the best scorers, regardless of position, they know how to get to their spots, and the opposition knows that that's the spot that they want to get to, and you can't stop them anyways. And I think Keaton Wagler has that uncoachable, natural ability with size, with frame, with the ability for him to get to whatever spot he wants at his pace. You go watch the film at Illinois. I mean, it speaks for itself. There's nothing I can say that it won't already speak for itself. But if you haven't watched Keaton Wagler, get accustomed to him. Watch him at Summer League in this upcoming year with the Clippers. He's such a treat. I love watching him play. He's just so smooth. His jump shot's just a thing of beauty. I mean, you couldn't teach a better looking jump shot. He's got the ability to score at all three levels. He can pass the basketball. He's got the size to be able to hold his own defensively as well. Just a well-rounded, just a rock solid player. And again, this is a guy, he gets drafted fifth. I think most years you take this guy number one overall and you have no qualms, which just goes to show you how good of a draft this is. Keaton Wagler, spectacular. And again, you're not going to find many people who like Ivica Zubac more than I do. But if you're the Clippers, you do that trade 50 million times out of 10. And look, Keaton Wagler, man, the Clippers have been dying for a player like that to come into the pipeline. They've got Darius Garland already. They've got Ben Mathurin. We'll see what happens with Kawhi. We'll go down the list with them. But look, Keaton Wagler to me is a spectacular player, and I can't wait to watch him at Summer League. He is, and this upcoming season, he's a treat. If you've never watched him play, if you have, he's only going to get better, man. I have nothing but good things to say about Keaton Wagler. I am as confident as can be that Keaton Wagler is going to be one of the best players in this draft and one of the best players in the league. Stay tuned and watch this guy. He is a treat to watch. He can shoot the crap out of the basketball. As I mentioned, he's got limitless range. He's got a great mid range. He's got the ability to get to the rim, to get to the foul line. I mean, the tape speaks for itself. There's nothing that this guy can't do on the offensive end of the floor. And then defensively, I think he can more than hold his own as well. But he's not the only guy that the Clippers added. To me, the Clippers had about as interesting a draft as you're going to find. And also going back to the Bulls real quick too. We mentioned Jalen Sellers on a two-way. They also added Toby Awaka on a two-way out of Arizona. Toby Awaka is going to be able to get after you defensively. That's where he's going to make his money. He's going to get after you defensively. He's going to do all the little things. He's going to rebound the ball. Anything Toby gives you offensively is a bonus. He is a defensive menace. And then you got Jalen Sellers, who I think, if you don't believe me, listen to Rick Pitino. But I think Jalen Sellers is going to be an absolute fucking rock star basketball player. And I think he's going to be on a standard deal before you know it. He's got my stamp of approval. We'll see if I'm right or not. But I think Jalen Sellers in a couple weeks at Summer League, and then this upcoming season, people are going to be watching Jalen Sellers. They're going to say, "Man, how did that guy go undrafted?" So here we go. Back to the Clippers. One of the guys we talked a lot about in the lead up to the draft, and we're going to continue to talk about, Baba Miller. Baba Miller at pick 36 for the Clippers, them getting him. So you mentioned Keaton Wagler. The fact they got Keaton Wagler and Baba Miller, as I mentioned, people don't like it maybe. Some people might, some people don't. I've always been a post-draft. That's where we really get after it, and you continue to add layers to it. We previewed the draft and the draft combine, and we've recapped, and then Summer League will come in. Look, Baba Miller and Keaton Walker on the same team. Wow. I love it. You can't have a better two picks than that. And then on top of that, you go out at pick 55 and you get Nick Martinelli. They get him in a trade. And there was a lot of moving parts here and I'm going to mention the Clippers' last pick that they got at pick 57, because that, to me, pick 57 might be the most interesting pick in the draft, especially because it sets up future conversations for future episodes. But going back to the Clippers, so there was a huge jumbling bit of trade bits that went on, and we're going to do the best we can to add into it as we get there. But it was a big trade so the New York Knicks, separate to what they did in this trade. So the New York Knicks, defending champions, shout out to the Knicks, shout out my guy Armand. So the Knicks went into round one, and the Knicks had pick number 25. The Knicks. Pick number 24. My apologies. They had pick number 25. And on top of that not only did they have pick number 25, they also had the first pick of the second round, which was pick number 31, and then they had pick 55. So I mention all of this because the Knicks were wheeling and dealing like madmen on the 2 days of the draft, rounds 1 and 2. Now, it was no surprise that they maneuvered in the way that they did, moving out of the first round. We talked about it with Armand. James Dolan said, "We are not going to be a second apron team. I will write as big of a check as possible that is not in the second apron. So you were not going to add a first round salary to your payroll." So them moving out of the first round made complete sense. So what do I mean by this? So the Knicks started the night with pick 24. They traded that pick to the Lakers. So Lakers move up to 24, and the Knicks go to 25. Then the Knicks trade 25 to Dallas. Dallas trades pick 30 to Phoenix. And then the Knicks get pick number 47, which we'll get to that, They get the draft rights to Melvin Aginsa, who was the 51st pick in 2024. They get 2 future second-round picks from Phoenix. They get 2 future second-round picks from Dallas, and they get cash considerations from the Lakers to go from 25 to 24. So all in all, the Knicks drop out of the first round. They go from 24 to 25 to 47. They had the draft rights to Melvin Aginsa, 2 future second-round picks from Phoenix, 2 from Dallas, cash considerations from the Lakers. I can't wait to talk about the Lakers, Dallas, and Phoenix, and the Knicks. But remarkably, this all sets the stage, as we said, to go all over the place. This sets the stage. We haven't even finished the Clippers. So there's that trade. Separately to that, so we mentioned that the Knicks had the first pick of day 2 of round 2, number 31 overall. So this is a big web of a trade here. So number 31 overall goes to Houston. Houston also receives cash considerations from the Clippers. We mentioned the Clippers. The Clippers get pick 55, which that pick comes via New York and Houston, funnels from both of them in this mega web of a trade. So the Clippers get pick 55 and Nick Martinelli. Nick Martinelli, we mentioned his teammate at Northwestern from his first year at Northwestern, Brooks Barnhizer. He gets drafted around the same part of the draft the year before from the Thunder. Nick Martinelli gets drafted. We mentioned that if Brooks Barnhizer was going to go in the 50s, that Nick Martinelli was going to go in the 50s. Well, lo and behold, Nick Martinelli went in the 50s. So you get some right, you get some wrong. We got that one right. No, I'm just kidding, but it has nothing to do with being right or wrong. But anyways, Nick Martinelli goes to the Clippers. The Pistons, we talked about the Pistons. I can't wait to talk about the Pistons. So the Pistons moved up from 21 to 17. I can't wait to talk about who they traded up for. They also received pick 53. I can't wait to talk about that, and I can't wait to talk about who the Pistons added on some Exhibit 10 deals and whatnot. Again, we'll get there. And then the Knicks get the 39th overall pick. The 39th overall pick, and that pick that they get came from Houston. So Houston moves up from 39 to 31. The Knicks drop from 31 to 39. We also mentioned they got 47. We'll talk about who they drafted at both of those picks. I'm actually going to talk about who the Knicks took at 39 and 47 before I guess we could talk about the Knicks. So the Knicks get 39. They get a 2029 second round pick, which is going to come from Sacramento, even though Sacramento is not in this trade. The pick originally is Sacramento's. They get the draft rights to Mojave King, who was the 47th pick in 2023, and then they get cash considerations from Detroit. So all in all, the Knicks enter the draft with 24, 31, and 55, and they end the night with 39, 47. They get the draft rights to Mojave King and Melvin Aginsa, 2 future second-round picks from Phoenix, 2 future second-round picks from Dallas. They get cash considerations from the Lakers and from the Clippers. And they get that 2029 second-round pick that's coming via Sacramento. Couldn't ask for a better maneuvering of things by Leon Rose and the defending champion New York Knicks. So I want to mention, the New York Knicks at number 39 took Jack Caillou. Jack Caillou is a 20-year-old prospect out of Germany. Jack Caillou was committed to play for Gonzaga. Because Jack Caillou is 20 years old, he had to make a decision of whether to enter the NBA draft or to go play for Gonzaga. He wasn't going to be able to do both because of his age, because he's 20. So Jack Caillou makes the decision to bypass going to Gonzaga as a 20-year-old and instead enter the draft. He gets drafted by the Knicks at 39. I bring this up because the Clippers, the Clippers added pick number 57 in a trade with Atlanta. I can't wait to talk about Atlanta. The Clippers trade from 52 to 57. They get cash considerations in 57 for the Hawks to move up to 52, which there's a reason why Atlanta moved up to 52. We'll get there. But at 57, I mentioned 39 and 57 might be the two most interesting picks of the draft because it connects to a much larger conversation that we're going to build into in a future recording that's coming very shortly, I promise you. Been edging that one for a long time. And I think the people know that that's the one I've been edging because there's so many levels to it. But at pick 57, the Clippers draft Narcisse Ngoy out of France. Why is this the most interesting pick in the draft? Well, we mentioned that a guy like Salio Niang last year was a guy who got drafted by Cleveland and was going to get signed to play college basketball this upcoming season. We mentioned a guy like Noam Yakov, who was in the draft this year, could have been drafted, did not get drafted, but he's going to play for Utah. The Utah Utes, not the Utah Jazz, the Utah Utes. There are a lot of other examples of players that we're going to get to at the end to tie this together. Narcisse Ngoy is going to be 22 years old in about 2 weeks. The way that it works is that once you get to that age cutoff, that Narcisse Ngoy, Noam Yakov, these guys, you are automatically eligible for the draft. What this means is that Narcisse Ngoy, before getting drafted by the Clippers, had signed to play for Auburn this upcoming season. But separately to Jack Caillou, because Jack Caillou is 20, Jack Caillou had to pick between playing at Gonzaga or getting drafted this year. So he chose to enter the draft and bypass going to Gonzaga at 20. Narcisse Ngoy is going to be 22. Narcisse Ngoy gets drafted by the Clippers at 57, but is going to still play for Auburn this upcoming season. Jack Caillou at 20, not able to play college basketball. Narcisse Ngoy will be 22, is eligible to play college basketball. And so Narcisse Ngoy, after the draft, says, I am still going to go play for Auburn. What does this mean? In the modern era, Narcisse Ngoy will be the first player in the modern era. Now, I know Larry Bird, we talked about bird rights. We'll talk about that when we get to our deep dive NBA offseason stuff. We'll talk about bird rights and all that, and we'll talk about the tax aprons and all that, because I don't know if we fully explained it. Some people might not have any idea what the hell I'm talking about with tax aprons and Exhibit 10s and two-ways and all these different things. But going back to Narcisse Ngoy. So Narcisse Ngoy will be a 22-year-old college basketball player for Auburn in the SEC. And his draft rights will be with the Clippers. So he's already been drafted. So whenever Narcisse Ngoy's collegiate career is over, if he wants to play in the NBA, the Clippers will have his draft rights. We mentioned the Knicks added Mojave King and Melvin Aginsa, their draft rights. So we talked a little bit about draft and stash. Some players get drafted internationally and they never come over. Some get drafted internationally, they come over immediately. Some they draft and stash them for a year and then they come over. And then again, some never come over. Narcisse Ngoy in the modern era will be the first player, again, not retroactively, not like James Nagy or Charles Bediako or any of these other previous examples. Or Salio Niang, if he comes and plays in college. Narcisse Ngoy will be the first player to get drafted and then play college basketball, as opposed to getting drafted and then, so it's going to be really interesting to see how Narcisse Ngoy does at Auburn. Does he ever play for the Clippers? I want to see how he does at Auburn. Look, this is a guy with a really intriguing skill set. He's a, you know, uh, even though he's gonna be 22. Narcisse Ngoy's got a lot of untapped potential. I want to see what he can do at Auburn, but I just think it's fascinating in stepping up this future conversation that Jack Kyle at 20 had to pick between Gonzaga and the NBA. He picks the NBA draft, and then Narcisse Ngoy probably wasn't expecting to get drafted, gets drafted at 57, still going to play at Auburn, but the Clippers now have his draft rights. So I think that's an incredibly fascinating parallel for people to get an idea of. But yeah, we mentioned Noam Yakov. He's an example of a guy who was eligible to be drafted. He'll be playing for the Utah Utes. There's another guy, Alec Edegbata, who's committed to play for the Utah Utes this upcoming season, was eligible to be drafted. He'll be 22 by this upcoming collegiate season. There's a lot of guys. Cal Baptist got a couple of guys that are going to be going in from overseas, and they're going to be playing college basketball. You've got guys at Campbell, Cal State Bakersfield, Chattanooga, Drexel, Florida, Loyola Chicago, Pepperdine, Portland State, UT Arlington, UT Martin, Utah Valley. You are going to have examples of players who were eligible to be drafted that are going to be probably 22, 23, that will be playing college basketball. So I can't wait to do our transfer portal recap and preview with all these guys now that the NBA draft has come to a close and we know who's going to be in college basketball. Stay tuned for that. But all in all, if you're the Clippers, you get Keaton Wagler, Baba Miller, Nick Martinelli, and you get the draft rights to Narcisse Ngoy. And then on top of that, you go in the undrafted market and you go in and you sign a couple of guys to some summer league deals mostly. You bring in Themis Folks from UCF, Riley Kugel from UCF. You bring them on summer league deals. We'll see how they play in summer league. It doesn't look like that's going to be an Exhibit 10 or a two-way. It's just a summer league deal for now for those two guys. Also, we got to go back to the Bulls. They also added Donovan Atwell on an Exhibit 10. Donovan Atwell could shoot the crap out of it. And then Houston Mallett on just a summer league deal. So we'll continue to monitor who fills out these summer league rosters, and then we'll do a proper summer league preview once all the rosters are finalized. Not just the Vegas Summer League, by the way, but the California Classic and the Utah Summer League. So I can't wait for all that. But Clippers, all in all, if they would have gotten just Keaton Wagler, it would have been a great draft. You get Baba Miller on top of that. I love me some Baba Miller. I think he could have been a first-round pick in other years. I think he's got first-round talent. I think Baba Miller's in a perfect spot. He's got great two-way potential. He could defend the crap out of he's got the ability to guard multiple positions, guard the paint, guard out on the perimeter, rebound, rim run, dunk, shoot the ball from the outside. He's a fun player, man. Nick Martinelli is the opposite of Baba Miller, but they're both great players in their own right. Where Baba Miller has all these athletic and length and intangibles you can't teach. Nick Martinelli might not be the most athletic dude on the planet comparatively to NBA players, I should mention. Obviously, one of the most genetically gifted people on the planet. But Nick Martinelli he's just an old school player. He's not going to wow you and jump out the gym or anything like that, but he can score the basketball. He's a fun player. And then Narcisse Ngoy, whether he ever plays for the Clippers or not, might be the most interesting draft pick just because of what it means and what it symbolizes. And then it sets up a future conversation for our upcoming long edged episode. Um, moving on, Brooklyn Nets. Was not surprised in the slightest to see the Brooklyn Nets take Mikal Brown Jr. There seemed to be a lot of smoke to the fire that they were going to take him. That proved to be accurate. Brooklyn a year ago had 5 first round picks. They used all 5 of them. All 5 of them were guys that like to have the ball in their hands in some capacity, whether, on the ball as a guard or in a case of Danny Wolf as a facilitating big. Positionless players, if you will, who like to have the ball in their hands. Now you bring in Mikal Brown Jr. to that. So now you go back. You got the 5 guys they took in the first round last year. Diego Demon, Ben Saraf, Nolan Traore, Danny Wolf, Drake Powell. Now you add Mikal Brown Jr. into the fold. We mentioned the Julius Randle trade. They moved from 33 to 28. They take Joshua Jefferson. Joshua Jefferson's a great winning player. I love that they took him there at 28. Love that he got taken in the end of the first round. There's a couple guys in that back end of the first round that I love that I love to see that they were first round picks. We'll get to them. They also added Tyler Bilodeau at pick 43. Every year in the second round, there are a couple of guys that get drafted that maybe you don't expect to get drafted, but in a planet of 8 billion people, there are only 30 NBA teams. So you really only get 30 sample sizes. It's part of the reason why I love college basketball because you get over 300 D1 alone. But I've always been of the opinion that there are a lot of people that if you gave them the opportunity could do great work and be great general managers. It just so happens there are only 30 spots and all these people, they all already have some exist. So you don't get very many outsiders. People that I hope we could get on the Unfiltered Report and they can show you that they'd be great general managers. But anyways, Tyler Bilodeau is an example of a guy. There are other players we'll mention where are you thinking before the draft that Tyler Bilodeau is going to get drafted? No, I'd be lying to you if I said I thought he was going to get drafted. But again, not everybody views prospects the same way. He gets drafted by Brooklyn. Look, this is not to say he's a bad player. I think, playing for Mick Cronin for the last 2 years at UCLA, this is a productive player. His last year at UCLA, he's giving you 17 points, 5 rebounds, an assist. He's got the ability to shoot the ball from deep, 46.5%, 46.4 to be exact, on 4.5 threes a game. Listen, this is a good player. So, was I expecting him to get drafted? No, but that's just because there's only 60 draft picks. And, there are a lot of guys that fall through the cracks, like when we talk about the Heat a little bit and teams like that, OKC, San Antonio, you always say, how the hell did these teams end up with these sort of players? And teams, there's 30 sample sizes. If there were, if you had people who were really plugged in, you probably, you get some really brilliant people who might never be general managers who would take those players. Or if there were more teams, you would get that. But I think that's something that a lot of people don't talk about. You see a lot of people say there's not enough talent. I think there's a lot of talent, not only in players, but there's a lot of people with brilliant minds and talent evaluation. People who if they apply for a job and say, hey, I want to be a scout, their resume probably doesn't even make it to anybody because Chat GPT or some AI thing spits it out because it's like, who the hell is this guy? But I think there are a lot of people out there that could be really good general managers. So not the tangent on that. But look, Tyler Bilodeau is a good player. Wasn't expecting him to get drafted, but I love to see a guy like that get an opportunity. I want to see what him and Joshua Jefferson can do. The Nets. I want to see what the Nets do. They're in an interesting spot. I like Jordy Fernandez a lot. They've got some interesting pieces. I want to see this team moving forward. Also in the undrafted sphere, Brooklyn goes in and they have Duke Brennan on a summer league deal, Dion Brown from one of my favorite teams this past season, St. Louis, on an Exhibit 10, and then Ben Hummerkaus from Illinois on an Exhibit 10. Dion Brown's a guy I really enjoyed watching. I like watching that whole St. Louis team. They got a couple guys we'll talk about later, not only uh, in the undrafted sphere. Shout out to my guy Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, not Kareem, Cream Abdul-Jabbar. He ends up on an Exhibit 10 with the Lakers. I can't wait to talk about the Lakers later from as objective as a perspective as I can. Wow, words are difficult. But Dion Brown, I want to see what he can do on that Exhibit 10. Can he maybe can one of those two guys try to get a two-way, or do they end up just being G League players for Brooklyn's G League affiliate? But all in all, with the Nets, they're in an interesting spot. Those guys that they took last year, I want to see what they can do with another year. I think all five of those guys should play summer league with Mikel Brown Jr. I want to see how do they distribute the touches of who has the ball in their hands. But I will say I'm a big Mikel Brown Jr. guy. Um, those guys they drafted out of the guys they drafted last year, the one that I like the most heading in. If we did this a year ago last year, which we didn't, the guy I like the most out of not only relative to the way they took him, I like Nolan Traore a lot. And I think he showed a lot of flashes this year that didn't dissuade me from that. I like Nolan Traore a lot. Yegor Demon and Ben Saroff are very similar players. I want to see what they can do with the full offseason. They do have an overlap in skill set. They both love to have the ball in their hands, facilitate. Yegor Demon, there was a lot of talk about him where he was only shooting threes at one point, which some people like that, some people don't. Drake Powell, I think, was always kind of the wild card of the four of them. I was kind of interested to see what that would look like. I think he's got a lot of athleticism, probably the longest term project. And then Danny Wolf, the most polished of them, the oldest of those five. He has an intriguing skill set. Jalen Wilson is a guy I've liked for a lot of years. I think he's one of those guys. Anytime he gets the opportunity to get extended minutes, he plays well, but he doesn't always get those minutes. We mentioned Leonard Miller, another guy watching the T Wolves in summer league for a lot of years. It used to kill me that he wasn't getting minutes. Was Josh Minot? Minot was on the Celtics and then ends up with Brooklyn. He's a guy I think has a lot of he has a unique skill set. A guy like Noah Clowney to me, another guy with a really unique skill set and that just modern day, length and athleticism that you can't teach with the ability to shoot the ball. I think Noah Clowney, to be honest with you, is a guy I think I would look out for as a breakout player moving forward. I think Noah Clowney's gonna surprise some people. I think he's gonna be a player I think can really show out for himself. Ochai Agbaji, his career hasn't really played out the way that I would have hoped for him, but he's a good player. Anytime he gets the chance to play, whether it's Toronto now with Brooklyn, I want to see Oshai get a shot. I loved watching him at Kansas when he was there. Similar to Jalen Wilson, Dayron Sharp's going to have the opportunity to start with Nick Claxton out of the fold. But I think and then they got Terrence Mann still too. They got Michael Porter Jr. They bring in Julius Randle. I want to see with Julius and Michael Porter Jr. Look, those two guys I think are going to take a lot of shots this upcoming season. Those two guys are probably going to try to drag the Nets floor up, but I think I want to see what these young guys can do. I want to see what a guy like Mikel Brown Jr. can do. I think you have to find ways to put the ball in his hands as much as possible. Let him be the scoring playmaker that he can be. Mikel Brown Jr., he can score from all three levels. He's got unlimited range. He's got great athleticism. This is a guy who had a back injury this past season. I think if it wasn't for that, you can make the argument that, look, someone has to go somewhere and someone's going to get drafted anywhere. But Mikel Brown Jr. is a guy, he's a top three, top five pick in pretty much any other year. So him going six is really just a testament to how good these other five guys are. And Mikel Brown Jr. can be as good as any of these guys. So I want to see if I'm Brooklyn, I'm putting all five of those guys from last year and Mikel Brown Jr. and Tyler Bilodeau and Joshua Jefferson. I'm throwing all of these guys out there at summer league, and I'm seeing who plays well with who. Who looks who out of my five first round picks last year, who's making a second year leap, who's not really looking that great. And then, so Brooklyn is a very wait and see team, I think, compared to some of these other teams. I'm in a wait and see mode with Brooklyn. I like Jordy Fernandez. I like Noah Clowney and some of these other guys. But I thought last year for a team that had 5 first round picks, I need to see more from those 5 guys collectively. But I do like Nolan Traore a lot, and I think Saraf and Demon have some overlapping skill sets that are intriguing. But I want to see if they can really build on what on last year. They showed some flashes, and I also showed a little bit of a rookie wall sort of deal. But I think there's some talent there if they can develop them internally. I think interesting squad. And then I think Julius Randle and Michael Porter Jr., those guys are going to get their shots up. I think that's a fact. Those 2 guys are going to get their shots up in the games that they play. So moving forward, oh man, it's Sacramento Kings time, baby. Sacramento Kings time. We talked about it. It wasn't going to surprise me one bit if they ended up taking Darius Acuff Jr. Lo and behold, that is exactly what they did. They took Darius Acuff Jr. But I want to say this: the 2 guys that they drafted, Scott Perry comes in last year, and we've talked a lot about the Kings. We talked a lot about the Bulls as well, kind of in a similar capacity. Ironically, the last 2 teams of DeMar DeRozan. Uh, I think the Bulls right now, we talked about them. They've got a high ceiling. I see what Sacramento is trying to do, and what Sacramento to me, and that was actually an article. So if you don't believe me, there was an ESPN propaganda piece that kind of said it before, and I felt this way before the propaganda piece, and this propaganda piece was a while back. But I think what Sacramento is trying to do is they're trying to be the Pittsburgh Steelers of the NBA. Not in the traditional sense of obviously the Steelers are a big brand, but I'm talking like the modern day Steelers, where we've talked a lot about the Steelers, and this is pre Mike McCarthy, with Mike Tomlin in the fold. Like the Steelers have always been one of those teams that do they have the highest? Have they had the highest ceiling in the post Ben Roethlisberger, Antonio Brown, Le'Veon Bell years? Absolutely not. They've been a team in the NFL that have been every year they overachieve in terms of what people expect, but they never had the long term ceiling to like, oh, they're going to win a championship. But they're consistently in the thick of it. They're tough to play. They're a pain in the ass defensively. Offensively, they might have a couple of great offensive players, but defense is their calling card. Everybody, so that is what I think Sacramento is trying to build. And I see what Scott Perry, as much shit as I give the Kings, I do give them a lot of shit. And I think out of every team looking forward, I mean, I think they're probably the bottom 3 of this upcoming season, if not the worst team in the league. There's a lot of pieces that have yet to be. So I don't want to say that definitively because there's a lot of moving parts. But I will say it would not surprise me if Sacramento actually competes better than people might expect this upcoming season. Are they going to make the playoffs? I'm not sitting here saying that. But I do see what they're doing. Look, again, they don't have my favorite long-term ceiling, so I don't want it to get misconstrued or like, again, the Wizards, the Jazz, the Grizzlies, some of these other teams we haven't even talked about, by the way. Like the Kings are in the bottom tier still of outlook. But last year, them drafting Neat Clifford and Maxime Reynaud, those were 2 picks they would have never made any other time in my lifetime that I can remember. Maxime Reynaud was one of the best rookies in the league this past season. And you only know that if you watch the Kings. Maxime Reynaud was brilliant. A 4-year player from Stanford, really productive player. High ceiling, too, by the way. And I couldn't believe the Kings got him because that was a pick that was very atypical to what you typically see. And so last year, if we would have came on here, I would have given my credit that they took a couple of guys and then Dylan Cardwell as a 2-way guy who's now on a standard deal. Those are culture-defining players, and I see what Scott Perry's trying to do. I see the long-term vision with Doug Christie at the helm. Obviously, Mike Brown wins a championship. Look, is Doug Christie the best coach in the NBA? No, but I think Doug's a good front man. It seems like the young guys that they had last year really respect him. I think Sacramento, if anything, needs to invest in some assistance for Doug to kind of fill in the gaps for where Doug Christie might not. Doug Christie to me, look, is he the best X's and O's coach in the NBA? Of course not. But I think I see what he represents, which is this defense mindset. You could see that Doug Christie last year was, I mean, there were some times last year when he was watching somebody like Zach LaVine. I think Doug Christie probably wanted to put his foot up Zach LaVine's ass and tell him to play some goddamn defense. And you saw that's why Zach LaVine didn't play a whole lot and they shut him down. Zach LaVine's going to pick up his player option. You could see the guys that Doug rocked with. I think the only guy, ironically, that did really, like DeMar has never been a defensive world beater. But, going back to DeMar real quick, too, like I think a lot of people bash DeMar and they say he's not a winning player and he's not going to have much value. I look, it will shock me if DeMar DeRozan's on the Kings, just like it'll shock me if Zach LaVine is not on the Kings. Look, no one's going to touch that contract. Zach LaVine's going to opt in. The Kings are just going to have to ride that out. Let that last year and let him walk. He's not going to turn down the money. No one's going to trade for that money. But with DeMar, you could waive and stretch DeMar. You could spread that money out. He has a $10 million guarantee out of the $25 million salary. So even if nobody trades for him, somebody might, somebody won't. Even if they don't, I'll be shocked if DeMar's on a team. I'll be shocked if DeMar's on the Kings, but I think DeMar has more value than people you'll find elsewhere will say. I don't want to make this DeMar DeRozan propaganda territory, but I think a lot of teams could have used DeMar in the playoffs this year. Some people might hear that and say, DeMar, playoffs? The fuck is this guy talking about? DeMar hasn't really been in the playoffs a whole lot in the last couple of years, so I think he's long removed from the Toronto days. I think if he had the opportunity to play in the playoffs any of these other years, I think he would have done a lot better for himself, whether they would have the playoff success or not. He's a much different player. I think he's got a ton of value for a team that you need someone, especially come playoff time, when the game slows down, can get you a tough bucket. I know some of the reports that I've seen from other publications that are not the Unfiltered Report have been like the Clippers. To be honest with you, I think there are a lot of teams I think would make a lot of sense for the right price, especially if you're telling me you're getting him for a vet minimum, say less. Steal, one of the steals of the offseason. He still got it, man. He could still get you buckets. He can still he can pass the ball. He's savvier as he's gonna play games. The best ability is availability. Um, Look, is he the best defender in the world? No, he's not. He really doesn't give you much in the rebounding department. All of his value is offensively, and a lot of that I get comes with the ball in his hands. But what a lot of people do not realize is that DeMar DeRozan's never had the opportunity to play on a team where he's not getting, whether it was Chicago, even Sacramento, when De'Aaron Fox was gone and all these guys like, DeMar, even in Sacramento, I mean, he's out here getting double, triple teamed and, having to carry the workload and have the ball in his hands and do all of that. And Sacramento didn't use him that great. Sometimes they did, sometimes they didn't. Just really depended on the game. But I think if you put him on another team that utilizes his skill set properly, because where Sacramento failed a lot of the times is they were using him as like a post up player sometimes. That's part of the reason, in my opinion, why Mike Brown got fired. And part of the reason why I think that's an important distinction. And I think it's a part of the reason why, it's a shame that we didn't get to see DeMar without Zach LaVine on the Kings, because if you look at the stretch from when Mike Brown got fired to before Zach LaVine came onto the Kings, DeMar was killing it, man. and especially once De'Aaron, and in the one game I remember they played Minnesota and De'Aaron Fox was not there, and it was Malik Monk, Keon Ellis, DeRozan, Keegan Murray, and Sabonis. Listen, man, if they would have just rocked it with that team, shut down De'Aaron Fox, rocked it with those 5 guys, I'm not saying they would have won a playoff series or anything, but they would have been a lot better to watch than if they would have than what they had with Zach Levine. And so I see a lot of people bash DeMar and they make fun of DeMar because it's like Zach Levine and DeMar like lumped together. You have to look at them separately. Zach Levine in a vacuum's a fine player too. Look, if you put Zach Levine on a team like Denver or something like that, I mean, sayonara, man. I mean, I mean, it's not that Zach Levine's a bad player, but for the money that they're paying him on, no, that's it's just a bad contract in that aspect because Zach Levine's not playing defense. He's not really giving you anything facilitating wise. I mean, look, Zach Levine had a brutal year for the Kings. Like that's part of the reason why the Kings were one of the worst teams in the league. Zach Levine was abysmal. Really just did not click. Sabonis, even before he got hurt, just never really seemed to get a rhythm down. They didn't really it, it felt like a lot of guys trying to make it work and it wasn't going to work. But somewhere underneath the surface, like again, they shut down Sabonis, they shut down Levine. Like if you watched a lot of the games in the second half of the season, which a lot of people probably did not, when the Kings were winning some games and it was DeMar, Westbrook, and all the young guys, a lot of people, a lot of Kings fans got mad, like, oh man, DeMar's dragging these guys. But you know what? Like, you could tell that Doug rocked with DeMar a lot. You could tell there's a lot of mutual respect there. Same thing with Russ. You could tell that the young players gravitated towards Doug Christie, and you could tell that DeMar and Russ were putting a lot into those young guys, Raynaud, Neat Clifford, Maxime Raynaud, down the line. And so I think whatever future success Sacramento has, they will have a lot of people might disagree. I think you will have to thank DeMar and Russ for that. Um, and so I see what they're doing. They're adding players that they've never added before. Um, they're adding winning players. Maybe their ceiling might not be as high. They might not be the best team in the NBA or anything like that. They might not have the highest ceiling, but I see the traits that they're trying to get. So it all goes full circle here. So the Kings had the 34th overall pick. And in addition to that, they also had the 45th overall pick. So what they did was they packaged a second round pick in 2032 and pick 34 to Cleveland. We mentioned Cleveland was a team that was probably going to try to trade down. They did. Another team with the aprons not going to pay that first round salary. We'll talk about other teams that did the same thing. So Sacramento jumps up to the back end of the first round at 29, and they take Alex Caravan. Alex Caravan is a player that the Kings, any other point in Kings history in my lifetime, they don't take that sort of player in the last 2 decades. But they move up 5 spots and they take him. Ironically, we'll get to Cleveland. Cleveland at pick 34. I thought Cleveland was one of the steals of the draft in Malik Thomas at 34. And I will say, I would have liked to have seen Sacramento as much as I like I don't mind the Alex Caravan pick from them. It would have been cool to see Darius Acuff Jr. and Malik Thomas have the opportunity to play together with the Kings. And that goes into that ceiling versus floor aspect of it. I think if they would have taken Malik Thomas, Sacramento, I think Malik Thomas gives them a higher ceiling. But I see what Doug Christie, Scott Perry, they want guys that are going to go out there and defend. They want guys that are going to go out there, take some pride on the defensive end. And they want to be able, they're stripping that thing down slowly but surely, and they're going to try to be the Steelers. Now, do you want to be the Steelers? If you ask me, no, I wouldn't want to be the Pittsburgh Steelers. But I think the Kings might be able to do that maybe better than the Steelers if they play their cards right, maybe worse than the Steelers as well. But I see what they're doing. That's the point that I'm making. And what they're doing is they're adding players that they would not have added previously, which are these winning players from winning programs that do the little things that add into winning. It's not the Vivek Ranadive, go get me Zach Levine. That was a mistake. And I think Scott Perry at least, I think Monty McNair didn't have Vivek's ear in the way that Scott Perry did, where, I think Monty McNair probably was somewhat nudged to do that. I think Scott Perry has the ear of Vivek Ranadive. So even if Scott Perry himself is not the best GM in the league, as long as there's less meddling from Vivek, that's where the Kings can raise their floor. And I think, again, I don't think they have that high of a ceiling comparative to a lot of these other teams, but I think I see what they're building, which is going to be a team that's going to compete on a nightly basis. They're going to compete. They're going to get after it defensively, and they still might suck ass, but they're going to play with pride. And it's not going to be like Zach Levine last year, which was a player with no pride. And so you go out, you get not only Alex Caravan, mind you, but then at pick 45, you go out and get a guy in Emmanuel Sharp, who I wish we would have talked about more in the pre-draft process, and that's my fault because I really like Emmanuel Sharp. And I hate using the term 3 and D because I think it doesn't fully encapsulate what these players can do. But if you do want to use 3 and D as that defining measurement for the people out there, you are not going to find a 3 and D player like Emmanuel Sharp. That dude, listen, you don't play for Kelvin Sampson if you don't play defense. One of the best defensive players in the Big 12 this past season. I mean, they had him guarding everybody. AJ DeBonsa, Darren Peterson, they had him guarding all those guys. And then on top of it, he's got a really nice jump shot. It's maybe not the most conventional jump shot, but as I've always said, and you'll continue to hear me say it today and future recordings, for the rest of my life, as long as I have breath in my body, I don't care what it looks like as long as it goes in. And Emmanuel Sharp can shoot that thing. A great shooter. He did it at the draft combine. He did it at Houston. Great defender. That's the type of player that Sacramento fans are going to love. He's going to come in. Look, is Emmanuel Sharp going to average 25 points per game like Darius Acuff can? No. But I see what they're doing in adding guys like Caravan and Emmanuel Sharp. You add that. Like if I'm Sacramento, I'm expecting Zach Levine to opt in. It's going to be very hard to move that contract. If you find someone that is willing to take that money, you do it in a heartbeat. But I don't think anyone's going to take that contract. You ride that Zach Levine contract out. To be honest with you, I would bench Zach Levine. He's coming off the bench next season. Whether that happens or not, time will tell. But if it was me, I would look into flipping Sabonis if you can. That's another hard contract to move, but there's probably more interest in Sabonis, obviously, than in Levine. And, DeMar, I mentioned, will the team trade for DeMar? Maybe not, especially if you could sign DeMar DeRozan as a free agent. What are you going to trade for him for? But I think DeMar's got value. I think DeMar's the type of player that, look, going back to last year's Kings team, I think all these players that they had last year are good players, but they didn't fit as a team. But in the second half of the year, when they shut all these guys down, it was DeMar, Russ, and a bunch of young guys. I think DeMar and Russ especially showed a lot of these young guys what it means to go out there and compete, even if you got nothing to play for. Give it your bet. Like they helped those young guys through different scenarios, and I think it was invaluable for those guys to play with those guys. And then again, a guy like Zach Levine, I don't want it to sound like I'm bagging on the guy because I actually do like Zach Levine probably more than most people. But Zach Levine is not a Kings player. That's the point I'm trying to make. Zach Levine, like if you put Levine on the Warriors or the Nuggets or whatever, it's a great player. You put him on the Pistons or something like that or any of these other teams. It's a great player. He's got the ability to shoot the crap out of the basketball. better than most people in the league. I think what's always been frustrating about Zach Levine is the handle has never really been that great for a guy who gets paid almost $50 million a year. He doesn't really defend, doesn't pass that like Demar to me can Demar can facilitate, and I don't see that with Zach, but Zach does have a skill set where, if you got Zach Levine to buy into being a guy who takes like 10 threes a game, flies around off the ball, and he's flying off of down screens and pin downs and moving around like a maniac, kind of like Clay Thompson on the Warriors back in the day. If you convince Zach Levine to do that, Zach Levine, I mean, you see the flashes when he goes off from three. It's a sight to behold. I mean, there are a few players in the league that when they get it going can fill it up like Zach Levine can. But on a team like Sacramento, that's not really, at least last year's rendition of Sacramento. Maybe without DeMar's gone. Maybe Zach, you start him next year, and Zach plays really well, boosts his value up. I could see that too. But I think if you're Sacramento, you gotta clear the deck, in my opinion, for your young guys to play as much as possible and to have the ball in their hands. So a guy like Darius Acuff Jr., he needs the ball in his hands. And look, ironically, Darius Acuff Jr., whatever success he has in the league, is going to come defensively, and additionally, but offensively is where he's going to make his money, I should say. I said that wrong. Like defensively, I see what they're like. I see the vision in a sense that you can have three or four other guys on the court that you could hide Darius Acuff and you can make up for that, even if he's not the best defender, because let's just be honest, he's not the biggest guy in the world. I'm not saying he's a bad defender, but you just need to find a way to mitigate defensively and let him do his thing offensively. Because if you put the reason I felt confident that Darius Acuff Jr. was going to be on the Kings is I think it was a perfect fit in the sense that that is the one team I think where they will give him the ball and let him do his thing in a way that he wouldn't have had the ability to do that on other teams. I think Sacramento has the ability to give him the ball and let him be that offensive engine. And then you've got these neat Cliffords. Also, I want to see, by the way, with Maxime Reynaud, I would love to see the two-man game with Darius Acuff Jr. and Maxime Reynaud. Russell Westbrook was a lot responsible for Maxime Reynaud having a rookie year that he did. Russell Westbrook early on in his Kings tenure when Maxime Reynaud started playing early on in the year, I remember there was a game, I forget who they were playing. It might have been like Golden State or something. And I think it was just at the end of the game was already over. And I think Russell Westbrook force-fed Maxime Reynaud the ball on every single possession. And he took the same little push shot 5 feet away from the rim on like 10 consecutive possessions at the end of the game is what it felt like. So I want to see that two-man game with Acuff and Maxime Reynaud. I want to see what Neat Clifford can do heading into year two. He showed some flashes, but because of the vets, I think Neat Clifford has the ability on the ball to be able to do some things that they didn't really let him do fully throughout the year. But now, obviously, with Darius Acuff Jr., maybe you don't see as many of that with Neat Clifford regardless. But I think Neat Clifford does have the ability to be a point forward type, facilitate. I think those two guys can play well together. I think if you get rid of DeMar, what it allows you to do, it's a win-win. I think DeMar gets what he wants and the opportunity to compete and play in the playoffs on a team that's going to have at least a chance. And then what it allows the Kings to do is it allows them the opportunity to slide Keegan Murray back to the three instead of him trying to guard a bunch of fours. Not that he can't do it, but I think Keegan Murray, I want to see what Keegan Murray can do. I think, I think they asked him, people forget Keegan Murray, one of the best shooters coming into the league out of the draft a couple years ago. As a rookie, he had some breathtaking performances. The shot hasn't really been as great the last 2 years, and I think part of that is because of the defensive load that they've had him have to carry because They haven't had many other guys that can get after it defensively. So now I think adding a guy like Alex Caravan, adding a guy like Emmanuel Sharp, can Keegan Murray now slide back down a slot? I know nowadays there's a lot of positionless basketball, but I want to see if Keegan Murray can now take the leap offensively. Now with an expanded role too, with more shot attempts up for grabs. I think Maxime Reynaud has to start. So if you keep Sabonis, I think you have to start the two of those guys together. I don't see a scenario where Maxime Reynaud comes off the bench. I think it would be a crime. I think Maxime Reynaud is a starter in the league. It's part of the reason why I think Sabonis would be really better off on a different team too. Sabonis is a fine player. He's not a five man though. And if you're gonna have him as a five man, you need a four guy who can make up for the deficiencies. And they haven't had that. And that's also part of the reason why Sacramento has struggled this past season. They didn't have point of attack defense, and they didn't have any rim protection when all those guys were out there. And when Sacramento played better was when it was Reno, Cardwell, the young guys with DeMar and these other guys. Like they, anytime Sacramento struggled was when all the vets were healthy. But anytime it was Sabonis was out, Levine was out, uh, they showed some flashes. So I want to see Maxime Reynaud with a full offseason. I want to see him start, build off of what he was able to do. I want to see that two-man game with him and Acuff Jr. I want to see Keegan Murray get the opportunity to take more shots. I want to see what Nick Clifford can do with an expanded role. Dylan Cardwell is going to be one of the most exciting players to watch who doesn't do anything statistically that'll wow you. But he's just one of those guys. If you have him on your team, you love him. And if you play against him, you hate him. He gets in your head. He agitates you. He blocks shots. He's going to use his six fouls. He's going to yell at the crowd. He's going to stick his tongue out and wag it. He's a fun player to watch off the bench. Um, Also on the subject of Sacramento, in the undrafted sphere, they were they added a couple of guys on some Exhibit 10 actions and some summer league deals. On a summer league deal, they added Anthony Del Orso, uh, Campbell to Arizona, BJ Edwards on an Exhibit 10, and then Elias Ralph out of Pacific on a summer league deal. Um, and then also Markel Sutton on a summer league deal out of LSU. So no two ways for them so far, if but just the one Exhibit 10. And then we'll see if what type of contract Emmanuel Sharp gets. But I think Emmanuel Sharp will make that roster. I think Caravan and Emmanuel Sharp. So look, with the Kings, do I think they have the highest ceiling in the league? No. Would I be surprised if they're the worst team in the NBA next year? No, I wouldn't. I think they'll be they won't be the greatest. But what I do think, I think their floor will be a little bit higher at least. I see what they're building. And I think guys like Caravan and Emmanuel Sharp signal the organizational cultural shift of what they're trying to build. So we'll see how it plays out. But I want to see what Darius Acuff Jr. can do in summer league, and put the ball in his hands, and let him be the offensive dynamo that he can be, and then have. I know he'll get after it as best he can defensively, but let guys like Caravan, Emmanuel Sharp do the little things: rebound, defend, stretch, space the floor. And I want to see Nick Clifford play in summer league. I want to see all those guys play together in summer league, and see what they can do. Moving on to Atlanta. We mentioned Atlanta. Listen, Atlanta trades Trey Young. They had a guy in Kingston Flemings who is really great. And in many other years, Kingston Flemings probably could be. You can make the argument he's a top 5 pick. Look, we mentioned with Emmanuel Sharp, you don't play defense. You don't play for Kelvin Sampson if you don't play defense. Kingston Flemings might not be the biggest dude in the world, but he'll get after you defensively, and he's a great offensive player, man. He could do some things offensively, on a veteran Houston team with Milos Uzan and Emmanuel Sharp and all these other guys we'll mention. They let Kingston Flemings, similar to what Illinois did with with Keaton Wagler. They did similarly at Houston. They put the ball in Kingston Fleming's hands and they said, "Hey, Kingston Fleming's, this guy's really fucking good, man." So for Atlanta to be able to get him at 8, and you can't ask for uh, you can't ask for a better thing. By the way, breaking news, nothing to do with anything, but Perry Manasian fired by the Angels. Wow, there you go. Look at that. And then Perry gets fired, and Carlos Mendoza of the Mets gets fired the same day. Also, World Cup action going on. So look, we're locked in on everything. NHL draft is going on right now. Wow, I just uh, saw that flash across the old laptop action. As we're doing this, but hey, there you go. Oh, I shouldn't say laptop, the phone. I got a text about it, but we're talking into a laptop, I should say. I don't want to misspeak. But yeah, going back to Atlanta, Atlanta at 8, getting Kingston Flemings. I mean, you can't ask for a better pick at pick 8 than that. But I love what they were able to do at 23. I mentioned there were a couple of guys that got drafted in the 20s that I was so happy to see get drafted in the first round. Joshua Jefferson was one of them. Uh, even a guy like Alex Caravan, cool to see him get drafted at the end of the first round. And then Zuby Ejiofor. I thought Zuby Ejiofor was a lock to go at the latest in the 30s. I thought he'd be an early day 2, round 2 guy. But he ends up going 23 to Atlanta. Zuby Ejiofor is a great player, man. We met, Zuby Ejiofor, that guy plays with his heart on his sleeve. One of the most athletic dudes in the draft, especially for a guy that size. He can rebound the ball. Just a really productive player, incredibly athletic. Does all the little things as well that you love in a player that's going to, contribute to winning. You can't ask for a better pick at 23. And then we mentioned the Atlanta Clippers trade earlier, making that full circle connection. Atlanta moves up to 52 to take a guy who I honestly, one of the surprises of the draft, I was surprised this guy lasted this long. Henri Vesar from Arizona to North Carolina. This past year at North Carolina, he took a really big leap in year 3 of his collegiate career. This guy's a legit 7 feet, giving you about 9 rebounds a game. He showed the ability to stretch out and shoot it this year. He goes 52, and Atlanta goes up and gets him. This is a guy, if Atlanta would have taken him at 23, you probably wouldn't see many complaints from me. But for them to get Zuby Ejiofor at 23 and then be able to get Henri Vesar at 52, a spectacular draft by Atlanta. I love what they're doing. I love what they're building. Jalen Johnson, to me, is one of the most exciting players in the league. I can't wait to see what he does for an encore. Them going out getting Kaminga last year. You know, I think Atlanta's, to me, one of the interesting teams in the league. I want to see what they do for an encore. I think Kingston Flemings, man, Kingston Flemings is going to fit in perfectly there because I think, that Jalen, we mentioned it's a positionless era. Like, you could put the ball in Kingston Fleming's hands and Jalen Johnson's hands, and they could play off of each other, and they can do it in different ways. Kingston Flemings can shoot it, he can score. Jalen Johnson's more that point forward type. He's going to do all in jack of all trades, triple double machine. I think those two guys are going to complement each other tremendously. And then Zuby Ejiofor fits in tremendously to what they want to do. And then you can't ask for a better pick at 52 than what they did with Henri Vesar. In addition to that, in the undrafted sphere, they look, credit to them. On an Exhibit 10, they bring in Isaac McNeely. He can really shoot it. Again, you go down the Atlanta Hawks roster here, and look, this is a fun team, man. I like some of the young players that they've got. Dyson Daniels, Nikhil Alexander Walker finally had the opportunity and expanded the role. I always had, we talk about summer league. I remember Nikhil Alexander Walker in summer league way back when, heading into his rookie year with the Pelicans. I thought he was going to be a 20-point per game guy. It just took a while, but eventually he got there to that 20-point per game frame. It shows that sometimes you got to be patient in this world. Mohamed Gay is a really interesting player. I want to see get an expanded run. We'll see what happens with Zachary Risache. He fell out of the rotation. Don't sleep on a guy like Asa Newell, the Georgia product. They took him in the first round last year. Listen, I think he's going to be a guy who's going to only going to get better, and I think he's a guy who could break out if you give him patience. I think he's a great player. Asa Newell can really do some things, so keep an eye on him. Uh, it's an interesting Atlanta team. They're going to be able to get after it defensively. Um, if they finally, after many years, finally cleared the runway for Onyeka Okongwu, people forget he's only 25, man. Uh, so look, I think Atlanta's got a lot of wings. They got a lot of guys that can get after you defensively at multiple positions. They've got switchability on defense. They've got the ability to get out and run. I like what Atlanta's doing. I think they've got a really sneaky squad. Look, is it the highest ceiling team in the league? Maybe not, but they're a sleeper team. Don't sleep on them. Moving on, Dallas. Listen, I'm excited to talk about Dallas. I really am, because Dallas got torn to shreds about a year ago, obviously with the Nico Harrison situation. They win the lottery. They get Cooper Flag, Jason Kidd. Gone but not forgotten. I've never been the biggest Jason Kidd guy as a coach per se, but I do give him credit for putting the ball in Cooper Flag's hands from Summer League game one to NBA game one. That's going to pay a lot of dividends. So, you got to give credit where it's due. But I think, listen, as much shit as you want to give Dallas and the ownership group, the Dumont Adelson family coming in, taking over from Mark Cuban and a Nico Harrison situation. I do give credit where it's due. I mean, you can't ask for a better 1 year turnaround than what they've been able to do, man. Look, we'll continue to talk about it. Them going out and hiring Dusty May to me, which was interesting. It sets up. We talked about Narcisse Ngoy going to Auburn, and we're setting up this future deep dive that we've been edging. That's going to go all over the place. If you think this is all over the place, that one's going to be 10 times worse than this, or better than this, depending on how you look at it. But look, Dusty May to me, and it was interesting in seeing the comments about Dusty May coming over. It was, part of the rationale, it appears to be from Dusty May's perspective, was obviously you get the chance to coach a guy like Cooper Flag. It's hard to turn that down, and some of the talent that they have. It's not just Cooper Flag, obviously. They got a lot of really good, talented players. But the college landscape, it's an unknown landscape. And that long edged episode that I can't wait to talk about, that's going to be part of it. And so I don't want to give away that episode too much, which is why I say we'll continue to talk about it. But just preliminarily, without talking about that piece of the puzzle, I think you couldn't have made a better hire in bringing in Masai Ujiri to run the front office with Mike Schmitz, which I believe Mike Schmitz and I might be connected on LinkedIn. So shout out to Mike Schmitz. But Masai Ujiri has been one of my favorite executives in the league for a long time. I mentioned there's only 30 sample sizes, so there's only so many. But, I give a lot of love to Sam Presti and some of these other guys. Masai is a guy I've loved what he's been able to do over the years with the Raptors, obviously, even before that in Denver. Him coming to Dallas, I think, is a great opportunity to showcase how great of an executive he is compared to the others. Because, as I mentioned, I think there are a lot of people out there that I would love to prop up on the Unfiltered Report and give them the opportunity to showcase that they could be pretty damn good general managers if you give them a chance. And then they know ball, baby. So the credit was due to Masai, and ownership. You got to, I guess similar to the Bulls. I don't want to give too much credit, but look, Masai Ujiri, Dusty May. You couldn't ask for a 1 year. How is it looking a year later? It's looking pretty fucking great, man. I'm gonna be honest with you. I thought Dallas did some of the best business of the draft too, and that's why I said it doesn't matter the order, because we get there. I thought Dallas had one of the best drafts in the entire NBA. So we talked about it a little bit in our rushed, and I want to really take the time. So when they hired Dusty May a couple of days before the draft, you're thinking, okay, are they gonna take one of those Michigan guys? And if they do, which one? So you're already looking at a team That's got Cooper Flag, Kyrie Irving's coming back. Max Christie, who they got in that Luka trade, is a solid player who people shouldn't forget about. They still got Daniel Gafford. Derek Lively's really talented as a big. Najee Marshall, honestly, man, he's one of the more underrated players in the league. I thought last year Najee Marshall had some of the best performances of his career, mind you. In his age 28 season, Najee Marshall had some great games. He's a great player. Ryan Nemhard, you want to talk about two ways? You can't talk about two ways without talking about Ryan Nemhard. That guy's a standard contract player for sure. PJ Washington still in the fold. Brandon Williams has always been interesting to me. Um, One of the rare examples of a guy who can score the ball at a size like that, and not shoot the three ball. I love to see that. I got some good players, man. Um, but heading in heading into the draft, they had pick 9. So you were interested to see where they're gonna take one of Dusty May's Michigan guys, and if they did, which one. Lo and behold, they take Morris Johnson Jr. out of Michigan, which I love that pick. It's a spectacular pick. Morris Johnson Jr. to me has got as high a ceiling as anybody, regardless of what he gives you on the offensive end. His defensive ability is top tier. What he can do defensively, rebounding the ball, blocking shots, getting in passing lanes, just being able to guard multiple positions. Just a freak of nature athletically. But I think offensively, he's got way more to give offensively than I think people might realize. I think the sky's the limit for this dude. I think him at 9 is tremendous. I think he's the kind of guy, whatever success that Dallas has in the future, he's going to be a huge part of that. Couldn't ask. I love the pick. Couldn't ask for a better pick at 9. But then I want to talk about what Dallas was able to do, kind of maneuvering around, making some moves outside of that in the trading sphere. So we talked about they were involved in one of these big trades, interwebs. So when the Knicks and Lakers made that 24-25 swap and the Lakers were sitting at 25, Dallas ends up making a trade to go get Sergio Delaria out of Spain. And then funny enough, we mentioned how the Grizzlies had the trade with Detroit, and I can't wait to talk about Detroit. Um, the Dallas Mavericks also day 2 at pick 56 were able to get, and apologies if I butcher his name, Vsevolod Ishichenko from Russia at pick 56, and that pick comes funneled in from the Lakers, where the Lakers and the Bulls receive cash considerations, and then Dallas gets pick 56 in Vsevolod Ishchenko. So you get those two guys and Sergio Delaria and Toby Lawal, who we mentioned. Toby Lawal, athletic freak of nature, can rim run, can defend multiple positions, just unheard of length with the highest vertical at the NBA draft combine in this draft class, one of the highest ever for a guy at that size. So the way I'm looking at it, man, Morris Johnson Jr., you get him at 9. And he's the guy where whatever he gives you offensively is a bonus. But obviously, you're taking him at pick 9 because I think his offensive ceiling is through the roof. And I think people are going to sleep on that ability. I think Morris Johnson Jr. is going to be one of the best players from this draft. I think he will be a huge determinant in the future success of the Dallas Mavericks because of his two-way ability. Then you get Toby Lawal in the second round at pick 48. So Toby Lawal, whatever he gives you offensively is a bonus. Defensively, you're getting that. And then with Sergio Delaria and Vsevolod Ishichenko, I mentioned many times before, you like to see the full picture. Like with the Clippers, it was like, oh, they got Keaton Wagler and Bob Miller, for example. With the Bulls, they got Dalen Swain, Caleb Wilson, Jalen Sellers. With the Grizzlies, you're getting Cam Boozer. You're getting Kareem Lopez, Richie Saunders. Like, we haven't even gotten to some of the teams who I think had some of the best drafts. We haven't even talked about some of the teams I thought had some arguably the best draft by the way. That's the best part about all of this. Um, but with Dallas, listen, the fact that you got both Sergio Delaria and Vasilevich, both of these dudes, man, don't sleep on either one of these guys. These guys have very, very unique offensive games. You could put the ball in their hands. Listen, I want to see both of these guys in summer league. I think both of these guys should. I want to see these guys in Dallas this year. I want to see these guys in summer league. I think. Listen, both of these guys have a lot of potential offensively. I think you could put the ball in their hands. They can do so many things with the ball in their hands. And a lot of people might not know these guys because they didn't play college ball and they played overseas. But trust me when I say, take my word for it, that one or both of these guys is going to become something in the league, and people will look back and say, "Damn, how did I get that guy when they got them?" Like these dudes are legit. They can do some things with the ball that'll make your eyebrows rise up a little bit, give you a little wrinkle in your forehead. You don't want the lines though. You want to make sure you put that retinol cream or whatever the hell they're selling, or whatever it is. Like take care of yourself. It's something I didn't realize at a young age. Took me a long time to realize that. So knock on wood. But yeah, it'll make you go, oh wow. They make some plays, some passes, some shots. Like the offensive package is there. So you get two very intriguing European guards, which by the way, great positional size for both of these guys. Both of them about 6'5", 6'6". Well, Ischenko's a little bit smaller. He's probably a little bit closer to 6'3", but Sergio Deloria is a good 6'5", 6'6". But both of them, you could put the ball in their hands, incredibly creative with the ball in their hands. They're great facilitators. They can score the ball. And not to say that they're bums defensively, but I think whatever they give you defensively is a bonus. So you've got two great defensive guys, and you've got a guy again at Morris Johnson Jr. that I think's got a really untapped offensive potential. And then these two guys from overseas that I think if one or both of them hit, it's well worth the stab. I think both there's a chance both of them hit, to be honest with you. Big fans of both of their games, and I want to see what they can do in summer league. And then Dallas also. So Dallas, they go in. To my knowledge, nothing that I've seen with them in the undrafted realm. I will report. I will update that if that changes, but nothing off the top of my head that I can recall them doing in the undrafted sphere. But when you add four guys like that, I guess you don't really need to, right? So now moving on here, continuing to chug along here. Milwaukee. Look, Milwaukee, we talked about them a little bit. Look, I think they're in a much better spot now than they were earlier in the week. Getting Braden Bird and Nate Amen. You get Malik Lewis at pick 60. That was a fun little trade there on day two, where the Magic get Isaiah Nelson, the Wizards get Felix Okpara, and then the Milwaukee Bucks got pick 60, which is Malik Lewis. And also, in addition to that, the Orlando Magic received cash considerations from Milwaukee. So Milwaukee goes down to 60. They give cash considerations to the Wizard, not to the Wizards, to the Magic. And then the Wizards at 46 take Felix Okpara. The Magic, the only draft pick the Magic had, Isaiah Nelson. Both of those picks, by the way, while we're on the subject, Felix Okpara, really, really like watching what he's able to do on the defensive end. He had a really good NBA draft combine too. If you haven't seen him play anytime before that, that was the first time you saw him play. But yeah, he can really protect the rim. He's a big boy. He's athletic. He moves well. Can really protect the rim. Isaiah Nelson cut from that same cloth of a guy like Toby Lawal, but more production. Listen, Isaiah Nelson was one of the most productive players in the country. He was Conference Player of the Year. It might have been the only draft pick from Orlando. Orlando new head coach Sean Sweeney. We'll get to them. But Isaiah Nelson, man, great pick for them and their only draft pick at 51. But yeah, going back to Orlando, for them being able to get those three guys, and then they get Rafael Castro on a two-way. Rafael Castro, another one of those long, lanky, really good defenders. Um, you know, I like what Milwaukee did. They're in a much better spot now than they were previously. And as I mentioned, I'll continue to try my best to talk about all of these teams in due time because I don't want to make it seem like I'm giving more love to some teams and not others. I just realized that it's been 2 hours and 15 minutes. Uh, so it's just one of those things you want to add to the fold as you go. Boopy Miller signed a summer league deal with the Milwaukee Bucks, though. It doesn't seem to be an Exhibit 10, just a summer league deal. But Boopy Miller, I like watching him play a lot. Whatever happens with him, uh, Boopy Miller can fill it up, man. Pound for pound, really enjoyable player to watch. I want to see what he can do with summer league with Rafael Castro, Malik Lewis, Braden Burries, Nate Ament, and whoever else they have on that squad. But yeah, I think things are looking up for Milwaukee. We talked about them a bit. We'll talk about them a bit more as well. Um, Coming down the line here, though, Golden State Warriors. We mentioned Morris Johnson Jr. We mentioned we mentioned Morris Johnson Jr. We mentioned Yaxel Lendeborg and Adai Mara. There was a good chance that those three guys were going to be lottery picks. Not to get ahead of ourselves, but all three of those guys end up being lottery picks. Yaxel Lendeborg at 11 to the Warriors. Uh, I think. Listen, Yaxel Lendeborg is going to have an opportunity to start day one for the Warriors. He fits in immediately. You want to talk about plug and play. The one thing about Yaxel Lendeborg that I want to make note of, I know some people have said that Yaxel Lendeborg is the oldest player in 2 decades to get drafted in the lottery. He'll be 24 uh, by the time opening day rolls around, opening night. But the one important thing to make note about with Yaxel Lendeborg is that this is a guy who hasn't been playing basketball for as long as a lot of these other guys. So even though he's older, he has a lot of untapped potential. And this is a guy who coming out, if he would have came into the draft last year without ever playing at Michigan, just from what he did at UAB, he probably could have been drafted in the first round in the 20s, but he bet on himself. He goes to Michigan, plays for Dusty May, plays with the Mara and Morris Johnson Jr. All three of them are lottery picks. All three of them play together in what is still remarkably one of the tallest and most productive lineups in the history of college basketball. So Yaxel Lendeborg was really a center at UAB. He was a paint guy. And at Michigan, Dusty May, that's why I love the Dusty May hire if you're Dallas. What Dusty May was able to do with all three of those guys, whether it's a Mara, Yaxel Lendeborg, Morris Johnson Jr. Listen, Yaxel Lendeborg showed a lot of ability at Michigan that he wasn't even able to showcase at UAB. The ability to have the ball in his hands, be able to score, shoot the basketball, pass the basketball. Listen, Yaxel Lendeborg is not your typical older lottery pick. I just want to make that note. Yaxel Lendeborg is a really good player. I can't wait to see what he does with the Warriors. I think a lot of people might say that they took him for the wrong reasons, looking at it because of the fact that you want to maximize that last little window with Steph Curry and Draymond Green. And so some people might say that they maybe made that pick and as a result, he doesn't have a higher ceiling, but he has a high floor. And that's why I would disagree. I think Yaxel Lendeborg's got a really high ceiling too. It just so happens that he really has a really high floor too. And he can be one of those guys who I know Steve Kerr historically doesn't like playing rookies and young guys, but I think Yaxel Lendeborg will be an exception to that rule. I think Yaxel Lendeborg, don't be surprised, day one, opening night, and he's starting, and he's a big reason of any success that the Warriors might have this upcoming season and moving forward. Yaxel Lendeborg is going to be a big part of that. And then, we mentioned earlier with a guy like Tyler Bilodeau, there are some guys that get drafted in the second round that maybe you don't expect heading into the draft. At pick 54, the Warriors take LeJay Jones. I did not expect LeJay Jones to get drafted. I'd be lying to you if I said that I did. There have been some rumblings that maybe LeJay Jones might be it could be a guy that maybe they keep him on some form of two-way or maybe domestic sort of draft and stash sort of deal as opposed to like a European guy because he went to Florida State. But we'll see what that looks like. Look, LeJay Jones, not a bad player by any stretch. He can shoot it. He's got good positional size. Um, he can do some things defensively. Like I hate to use the 3 and D thing because it just doesn't really I don't like that, but he fits in that mold of a guy who's got a good frame to him. He can shoot the ball, defensive capabilities. But with the Warriors, two of these undrafted guys, I think, have a really good shot of finding a way and kicking the door down with the foot in the door and finding a way to make that team. I want to give some love to my guy Graham Ike and to Nick Boyd. I think both of those guys are gonna. I can't wait to see. I think, Yaxel Lendeborg, Nick Boyd, and Graham Ike, those guys are going to be playing some grown man ball in the California Classic and in Vegas. I can't wait to see what those guys do. Uh, it also appears that Reese Dixon Waters signed a summer league deal. Uh, but I want to give love to Nick Boyd and Graham Ike. I think those two guys, both of them signed Exhibit 10 deals. Do not be surprised if one or both of those guys not only gets that Exhibit 10 flip to a two-way, but then one or both of those guys find a way onto the standard roster sooner than later. I think both of those guys are professional basketball players. I really believe that. I could be wrong, but take my word for it if you want. I think Graham Ike and Nick Boyd, even though they didn't get drafted, I think I wouldn't be surprised if those two guys find a way, both of them. I think Graham Ike, incredibly productive player. I know not the youngest prospect in the world, but you know what? I don't care. Look, just watch Graham Ike in summer league. Watch Nick Boyd, both of them. Nick Boyd's 25. Graham Ike is about to be 24. Look, they're going to play some grown man ball in summer league, and I think these guys are going to show their worth and show their value. And I think, just because you're older prospect doesn't mean you don't have a high ceiling moving forward as well. So keep an eye on those two guys as undrafted guys. I think those two guys are going to have a shot to make the roster. Um, and then obviously there will be a lot. We'll find out about the Warriors. We're going to talk about that in due time. A lot of people talk about the Warriors, and we'll do that as well. But continuing to move forward here, Oklahoma City. We spent a lot of Sam Presti, Oklahoma City propaganda. You can't, I mean, listen, the rich get richer, man. Them getting a Mara at 12. I know a Mara said that he didn't even work out with the Thunder. He just interviewed with them at the combine. Mara is a really good player, man. He's 7'3". He's a legit 7'3". Similar, we talked about Danny Wolf and Dusty May, and Danny Wolf being a big guy who could pass last year. Danny Wolf walks so a Mara can run. A Mara 7'3". A Mara can pass the basketball. Don't sleep on that part of his game. I think he's going to be able to showcase an ability to shoot the ball in a way that maybe some people might be surprised about. Defensively, you're going to get is rock solid. I mean, a rich get richer. A Mara, man, the fact that he's going to Oklahoma City is ridiculous. A Mara could be a starting center in the NBA. And the fact that, listen, I think a Mara, yeah, and they still got Thomas Sorber waiting in the wings too, by the way, from last year. So the rich get richer. I mean, holy smokes, man. A Mara fits perfectly, and I think he's going to be able to play immediately for them. A Mara is a guy, they could have used him against San Antonio this year. I think if they would have had him in this series this past year, you never know. So, I mean, look, the rich get richer. And then on top of that, we mentioned they traded 2 second-round picks to move up a spot. 2 second-round picks is nothing to Sam Presti and the Oklahoma City Thunder. They move up from 17 to 16 to take Bennett Sturts. Another example of the rich get richer. Bennett Sturts, I think, can roll off the bench game one of the NBA season for Oklahoma City if they want to play him, and they can give him 20 good minutes of really good basketball. Bennett Sturts is a basketball player, man. That guy is a legit player, and don't let the fact that he was a older quote unquote prospect fool you with the fact that he's got a ceiling too, man. He does a lot of really good things. Shout out to Ben McCollum, his college coach these last couple of years. Look, Bennett Sturts, man. Bennett Sturts can do the deal. He is an offensive dynamo, and you don't play for Ben McCollum if you don't play defense. Bennett Sturts, the rich get richer, man. I genuinely cannot believe that he is there. last 2 years in college at Drake and Iowa for Ben McCollum, 19 points, 5 rebounds, 19 points and 5 assists at Drake, along with 4 rebounds, and at Iowa, 19.8 points, 2.6 rebounds, 4.4 assists. Um, and 35.8% from three on 6.9 attempts from three. This guy can roll out of, I said he can roll out of bed. He can roll out of bed and contribute for OKC right off the bat, just with the Daimara. And then I can't wait to talk about this trade that happened between OKC and Miami. Miami and OKC swapped 37 and 41. OKC trades down from pick 37. Miami trades up to 37. Miami trades cash considerations and 41 to OKC. This to me is about as a win-win of a trade as you're ever going to see, and it's a good opportunity to talk about Miami too. Look, Oklahoma City gets Otega Owe at 41. Otega Owe, Otega Owe on the Thunder. Talk about a match made in heaven. I know on the draft broadcast they kind of talked about him kind of like the Lou Dort mold. And I think Otega Owe, yeah, he can defend. He's gonna make his money on the defensive end, and it's a perfect fit for him. But I think maybe I'm different than a lot of people. I think Otega Owe has the ability offensively as well. I think he's a really unique player on the offensive end. He's one of those guys. It just feels like he just finds a way to put the ball in the basket, and you look. Anytime you watch him play, it feels like he gets a really solid 20 points, and he does it in his own unconventional way. But yeah, look, defensively, he fits right in there. Obviously, OKC's got a lot of guys who can do things offensively. So, Otega always going to get his minutes defensively, but don't sleep on his ability offensively. Um, and then also on the subject of Oklahoma City, I mean, man, Oklahoma City, they go in, they always seemingly every year find guys in the undrafted market as well. They added a bunch of guys already. Sam Alexis to a summer league deal, Nate Johnson on an Exhibit 10, Lamar Wilkerson out of Indiana via Sam Houston State. That's an Exhibit 10. Josh Dix, Iowa to Creighton. He gets a two-way. And then Elijah Mahi out of Santa Clara gets a summer league deal. And then Christoph Tilly from Santa Clara to Ohio State, he gets an Exhibit 10. So they've been very active. Oh, and then Bryce Harris out of Howard getting a summer league deal. So they were very active in the undrafted market. Josh Dix is a shooter. Really interesting two-way guy for the Thunder. You trust Sam Presti. I like this Lamar Wilkerson guy a lot on an Exhibit 10. To be honest with you, they traded Isaiah Joe earlier today. I think Lamar Wilkerson could be their Isaiah Joe replacement. To be honest with you, Lamar Wilkerson can shoot the crap out of the basketball, and he can be cheaper now. That's how good organizations do it. You find out Isaiah Joe, undrafted free agent, you pay him, you flip him, you get some second round picks, you shed some salary, and then you recycle the pipeline with Josh Dix, Lamar Wilkerson, uh, you know, and then these two Santa Clara guys, Christoph Tilly and Elijah Mahi. I want to see what they can do, and then Bryce Harris can score the basketball out of Howard too. I don't know if he'll make. It seems like it's just a summer league deal. He seems like the kind of guy who'll probably be a G League player. But Bryce Harris, no shame in that. Listen, he could get buckets. Um, and then going to Miami. Miami in that trade, they trade up, they get Ryan Conwell. This is going to be one of those examples where people are going to say Miami does it again. In a couple months, they'll say, "Where did this Ryan Conwell guy come from?" Well, the Unfiltered Report is going to tell you right now, Ryan Conwell at 37. That guy is an absolutely outstanding pick by Miami. Could not love it more. I think Ryan Conwell fits in right away. And then on top of that, one of the biggest surprises of the draft for me was Keyshawn Big Guard Hall not getting drafted. So for Miami to get him and not only get him, but on an Exhibit 10 and not on a two-way is remarkable to me. But I think Keyshawn Big Guard Hall is going to find his way onto a two-way, and he's going to find his way onto that roster sooner than later. Keyshawn Big Guard Hall and Ryan Conwell. Can't wait to watch these two guys at Summer League. But Miami did a really good, they added some great dudes outside of that too. Um, they also went in and they added Javon Hadley on an Exhibit 10. Trey Donaldson, who I've been a big fan of, whether it was Auburn, Michigan, Miami. They bring in Trey Donaldson on a two-way. They bring in a couple guys on a summer league deal. Nate Kings from Syracuse, Michi Johnson Jr., Ezra Assar, who was at East Carolina, then USC, and then the 7-footer out of SIUE. Arnis Sakanis. Uh, 7-footers don't grow on trees. They brought him on a summer league deal. We'll see what happens there. But I think with Miami, the guys I would highlight Javon Hadley and Trey Donaldson and Keyshawn Big Guard Hall. Keyshawn Big Guard Hall, especially in addition to Ryan Conwell. And then, yeah, Keyshawn Big Guard Hall, Trey Donaldson, and Ryan Conwell. I can't wait to see those three dudes along with Javon Hadley at Summer League. I wouldn't be surprised if definitely I'm putting my look. I could be wrong. I think Keyshawn Big Guard Hall is gonna make it. I think Trey Donaldson will as well, and I think Javon Hadley as well. I think all four of those guys will find a way onto the Heat. And listen, Ryan Conwell and Keyshawn Big Guard Hall especially. Those two guys, I can't wait to watch. The fact that I mentioned the full picture, the fact they got not only one but both of those guys is going to be people are going to come back in a couple of months and they're going to say, how did they get both of those guys? I'm just letting you know now. They got them. So shout out to Miami for that. Continuing to move down the list here. This is an opportunity now to talk about Charlotte and Minnesota and that LaMelo Ball trade. So we mentioned Julius Randle traded, salary dump. You figured a bigger move was coming. They end up getting LaMelo Ball, which Armand and I would have been really prophetic if we talked about it on the record instead of off the record that same day. But we forgot to plug that in there. But nevertheless, it's one of those deals I think is a great deal for both teams. Just to run through what that deal looked like for those of you who did not see the trade. The Charlotte Hornets traded LaMelo Ball and Josh Green to Minnesota for Naz Reid. And in addition to Naz Reid, they get a 2033 unprotected first round pick, 3 second-round picks in 2029, 2032, and 2033. And then Charlotte also gets first-round pick swaps in 2028, 2029, and 2030. So if you ask me, it's a win-win for both teams. Why do I say that? Well, I'll start with the Charlotte side of the equation. So actually, I'll start with both. So Charlotte, from when the calendar year flipped over from January 1st up until they got their asses kicked in the playing game against Orlando, Charlotte was one of the best teams in the entire NBA. The Hornets were 11 and 23 on January 2nd, but over the next 45 games, they won 32 of those games. They beat the Knicks, the Thunder, the Spurs, the Nuggets, and the Celtics. And from January 1st until they got their asses kicked against Orlando in a one-off, they had the top-ranked offense in the NBA and the fifth-ranked defense in the NBA. So you might be looking at that and you might be thinking, why the hell did they trade LaMelo Ball? Especially because LaMelo Ball is such a big part of that. I think two things can be true at once. I think LaMelo Ball is a huge part of that. And I think they will feel the loss of LaMelo Ball, obviously, a little bit. But you cannot turn that down. Where you're getting Naz Reid, a 2033 unprotected first-round pick, 3 second-round picks, and 3 first-round pick swaps. You don't turn that down. Why do you not turn that down? Because if you're Charlotte, you go out, you re-sign Kobe White just a few hours later to a 3-year, $74 million deal. But before that, before they even traded LaMelo Ball, they go in, they draft at pick 14, Hannes Steinbach, And then at pick 18, they take Christian Anderson Jr. And this is why I like to say it doesn't matter the order, because here we are over 2.5 hours into this recording. And Charlotte had one of, if not my favorite drafts, just with those two guys alone. Hannes Steinbach and Christian Anderson, the fact they got not only one, but both of those guys. I love that they didn't package those picks. They didn't trade up. They took it, both of those guys. We mentioned Jack Caillou, Christian Anderson, and Hannes Steinbach all played for Germany, for the U19 team. Christian Anderson, to me, is a fucking baller, man. I don't care if he's pick 18. To me, he's a top 10 pick. He's a top 10 player, regardless of where it was a really great draft. Somebody has to fall. Christian Anderson, to me, if you've never watched Christian Anderson play, watch him at Summer League. The dude is a dynamo with the ball in his hands. He can score and facilitate with the best of them. You don't play for Grant McCaslin if you don't play defense. Christian Anderson. Listen, Kobe White's going to be the starting point guard. I think Christian Anderson could be a starting point guard in the NBA. I'm just going to say that's a big reason why, in my opinion. I think Christian Anderson can push the pace and play different to LaMelo Ball, but similarly. And so you get Christian Anderson, you've got Kobe White already, and then Hannes Steinbach, man. You want to talk about one of the most productive players in college basketball this season as a freshman out of Germany. Listen, these two guys together in Summer League, I cannot wait to watch the two-man game they've got. Charlotte, even without LaMelo Ball, you add these two guys, you add Naz Reid on top of what you had last year, Con Knipple. Brandon Miller's going to – listen, Brandon Miller, man, Brandon Miller to me is an all-star. And I think you could book it down. I think Brandon Miller's an all-star. You could timestamp it. Brandon Miller's going to be an all-star. Can't wait to watch Brandon Miller and Con Knipple, and then, Kobe White and Christian Anderson. Those two guys, I think the aggregate of that makes the loss of LaMelo Ball a little bit better. And then Naz Reid is waiting for the breakout. When they traded Julius Randle, it was, now Naz Reid could start for the Timberwolves, and then not even a couple of days later, they traded him to Charlotte. I think it's a great opportunity for Naz Reid. People forget he's still super, super young. In addition, Charlotte also had some of my favorite undrafted moves. We mentioned Michael Ajayi on a two-way. I can't wait to see him at Summer League. He's an incredibly productive player, great rebounder. He can score the ball. He can defend. Latrell Wrightsell Jr., shout out Cal State Fullerton, man. Go Titans. Transfers to Alabama. He was there for a couple of years at Alabama, it felt like. Played a lot of years in college. Feels like he was at Fullerton 5 years ago. But listen, Latrell Wrightsell Jr. can shoot it with the best of them. He's on an Exhibit 10. And then Max McKinnon, who spent the last year at LSU, he can also shoot it with the best of them. And then you're also adding a guy in Wyatt Fricks out of Marshall, who also a similar profile as a big, can really stretch out and shoot it. But I like those three guys, Wrightsell, McKinnon, and Ajayi. I want to see what Latrell Wrightsell and Max McKinnon can do. Go Tigers, go Titans. And then Michael Ajayi on the two-way. You take those guys, pair them with Christian Anderson and Hannes Steinbach. I can't wait to see that team at Summer League. But then, I think it's a win-win because, look, Minnesota, man, listen, I think LaMelo Ball is a spectacular player. I really do. I think LaMelo Ball is one of my favorite players to watch in the league. I think the fit with him and Anthony Edwards, two top 3 picks in the same draft. I think those two guys are I think it's the perfect fit, man. Minnesota's been the big thing that they've been missing. They've needed a dynamic point guard. It's been evident that Anthony Edwards, we mentioned Cooper Flagg and putting the ball in his hands. Minnesota tried to do that with Ant Edwards. I think Cooper Flagg is a little bit more built for that than Ant Edwards is. It's not a knock on Anthony Edwards. He's one of the best players in the league. But I think what this allows Minnesota to do is now you can't double Anthony Edwards. Anthony Edwards getting frustrated. You can't. You got LaMelo Ball. LaMelo Ball can take 17 to 20 shots a game. Naz Reid and Julius Randle, that's about 26 shots a game that are up for grabs. And I think being able to distribute that, obviously LaMelo's going to take a lot of those. You figure at least 17 to 20 of those will go to LaMelo Ball. But I think the big winner in all this as well is Jaden McDaniels. I've been banging the Jaden McDaniels drum for a long time. And I want to bang it on the record here. I think this is the year that Jaden McDaniels takes the leap to 20 points per game, all-star level player, all NBA defense with the two-way ability of what he can do offensively. I think the offensive ability has always been there. It just hasn't had the touches and the ability to really do that and to showcase that. But now I think with him having a full offseason to mentally and physically prepare for an expanded offensive role, Jaden McDaniel is going to be one of the breakout players in the league this year. Not that he has coming out of nowhere, but he's going to take a huge leap, in my opinion. I think LaMelo Ball, I love to gamble. I think if you're Minnesota, I like what Tim Connolly does. There's only 30 general managers, like I said. I'm sure there would be other people who'd make riverboat gambler moves, but there's a lot of riverboat gambler Tim Connolly propaganda out there. But you know what? I give a lot of credit where it's due. He's always been aggressive. I think it's a great move. Ironically, they've been supersized now for a long time, and now they have a little bit of a gap at the four. Do they try to, find a four with the limited maneuvering ability that they're able to do, or do they maybe run a smaller lineup? LaMelo, Dosunmu, and Edwards, Jaden McDaniels, Rudy Gobert, or do they bring Io off the bench, find a four-man? In my opinion, I think Terrence Shannon Jr. is the perfect example of a guy who, in an expanded role, can be a legitimate 20 something point per game guy as well. He's only 25. To be honest with you, I would love to see him on a team like Sacramento or something and just let him go out there and ball out. You look at any time Terrence Shannon Jr. has the opportunity to play last 3 games of the regular season, playoffs, whatever it may be. Terrence Shannon Jr. is a blur man. He can score. He can get to the rim. He gets to the foul line. He's great on defense. He's athletic. I think if Minnesota keeps him, they have to find a way to get more minutes for him. They've struggled to do that with their young players in the past. Leonard Miller, guys like that we've mentioned. Terrence Shannon Jr., I want to see him. If he's not getting minutes in Minnesota, I think Minnesota should flip him, do him the due diligence, let him get an expanded role somewhere else, and maybe you can find a way to plug in a power forward in flipping Terrence Shannon Jr. Um, and then Minnesota's got a guy in Yohan Berenger waiting in the wings as well. Young French dude. He's got a lot of talent on the defensive end. Don't sleep on him moving forward. Kind of, learning from Rudy especially. But look, Minnesota is going to have to do a lot of maneuvering. They're going to be, one of the higher spending teams in the league. They still got Slow-Mo, Kyle Anderson. They got a couple of other guys. Obviously, Bones Highland is someone I've liked for a lot of years. They added Isaiah Evans at that 33rd pick, which is one of the steals of the draft. I mentioned him and Malik Thomas. I think them going back-to-back 33, 34, both of those guys are steals. If you're Isaiah Evans, you got to be fired up, motivated. I thought he should have been a first-round pick. I was honestly surprised that he wasn't. One of my surprises of the draft, similar like I mentioned with Keyshawn Big Guard Hall not getting drafted. This was a little bit of a surprise to me, but take that opportunity and run, young man. Enrique Freeman, he's a guy I've liked for a lot of years. He signed originally with the Pacers. He's on a two-way with the Timberwolves. He can really rebound the ball. Zion Pullum's a guy I really like at UC Riverside in Florida. He's kind of kicking it in the wings on a two-way. Trey Kaufman-Renn, they drafted with the 59th overall pick. I think Trey Kaufman-Renn, to be honest with you, could be a dark horse candidate to slot into that power forward slot. I'm not even bullshitting you. I think Trey Kaufman-Renn could be the answer that they're looking for, and would save them a lot of money. So don't sleep on that as a possibility. By the way, just throwing that out there for the people. Don't be surprised, especially because Trey Kaufman-Renn showed the ability to shoot it after his season and career ended at Purdue in the months since that season ended, heading into the draft. Minnesota also went in Devin McLaughlin on a summer league deal. Toby Harris, not Tobias Harris. These two guys on summer league deals. Nothing else that I've seen regarding any Exhibit 10s or two ways, but when I see it, I'll plug that information in there. continuing to chug along here. And okay, yeah, just going back, I think win-win trade. Charlotte Hornets. I don't think you turn that down, but I love Lamelo Ball. I think, to be honest with you, the Timberwolves might be the most. I mean, there's a lot of time from now into the beginning of the year, but you talk about box office. Hey man, the T Wolves are going to be a lot of fun. I think Lamelo Ball is box office. He's a guy who puts butts in the seats for that entertainment purpose that you mentioned. But he's a damn good basketball player. I think he's gotten a bad rep for whatever reason. This dude can really go out there and do some things. He's a great player. Um, Lamelo Ball can do some things, man. Don't sleep on him. I mean, not that people are sleeping on him, but him and Edwards together is going to be box office, and then Jaden McDaniels is going to take that leap. 20-point per game guy, all NBA defense. You've still got Io Dusumu, Rudy Gobert. It's a good team. You got Dante DiVincenzo. We'll see if he can come back or not this upcoming season, and we'll see what other moves Minnesota makes because they will have to make moves in order to make the money work. But Tim Connolly's basically said we are going to make this work. So expect LaMelo Ball in a Timberwolves jersey. I can't wait to see it. That's going to be such a fun duo. And we always talk about number one option, number two option in other places. Fuck all that bullshit. They got three number ones as far as I'm concerned. And they got a couple other guys who can really do some damage regardless of their ones or twos. Like LaMelo Ball is a 1A. And Edwards is a 1A. And then I think Jaden McDaniels is going to show people this year. So I can't wait to watch the T Wolves. That's the perfect all in move to get them over the hump. If you're Minnesota, you take that gamble. And then if you're Charlotte, it's hard to turn that down. So I see why they took it. Even though LaMelo Ball was a huge part of the reason why they were one of the best teams in the league this past season. Moving on, continue to chug along here as best we can. The Detroit Pistons, we talked about them a little bit. So they were involved in that trade. They trade from 21 to 17. They also traded Isaiah Stewart. Um, and they were the team that traded for Isaiah Joe. So they've been very active. They'll continue to be active. But I love what they did in the draft and in the undrafted sphere. So they go out, they trade up 4 spots to get Ibuka Okori. Kind of mentioned it in our little speed run. Look, it was shocking to me to see a lot of people think Ibuka Okori was a guy who was like a late first kind of guy. So to see him go 17th was very validating for me because I thought, listen, Ibuka Okori, man, this is a guy, one of the best scorers in the entire country, regardless of freshman, sophomore. We mentioned Maxime Reynaud at Stanford with the Kings. Ibuka Okori at Stanford flew under the radar because he was at Stanford. Ibuka Okori, man, this guy, three-level scorer. He gets to the foul line. He can shoot it on and off the dribble. He gets after it defensively. He's athletic. This is a phenomenal pick. The success that they've had with a guy like Danis Jenkins, Ibuka Okori, man, you plug him in there. I mean, Ibuka Okori is the kind of guy you think Danis Jenkins had some good stats when Cade Cunningham was out, and even when Cunningham's there. Ibuka Okori is a ball player, man. He's going to surprise a lot of people who, if you haven't seen him already, he can really fucking flat out play. On top of that, they added Ugana Onyenso, and another one of those aforementioned trades at pick 53. Ugana Onyenso, we mentioned him. If you've never watched Ugana Onyenso play, watch the ACC tournament. Watch what he did to Duke and Cam Boozer and those guys. He had 9 blocks in that game. I think in the ACC tournament, he averaged like 7 blocks a game. You want to talk about rim protector, and you want to talk about humility. This is a guy who was on day 2, was president at ESPN's draft coverage and said he didn't expect to get drafted. Believe it, young man, you got drafted, and this guy can really protect the rim. He's a legit 7 feet. Don't sleep on Ugano and Yenso and Ibuka Okori together. Trades in Langdon continuing to do great business with Detroit. And then they did some really exciting things in the undrafted sphere I want to talk about. We mentioned Graham Ike and Nick Boyd on Exhibit 10s. Keep an eye out on Jaden Henley and Corey Stevenson in Exhibit 10s. We talked about Jaden Henley before, but we have not talked about Corey Stevenson, and that is my bad because we're going to do it now. We're going to make up for it. Corey Stevenson, man. Corey Stevenson out of Florida International University. This is a guy 18 points and 6 rebounds per game this past season at Florida International. Had some really good games, played really well against LSU, go Tigers, played really well against Miami. This is a guy who he can shoot the ball. We mentioned it's a similar thing we're going to talk about. Kind of an unorthodox looking jump shot, but I mean, it goes in. It's a beautiful looking jump shot to me. Some people might disagree. To me, it's a beautiful looking jump shot. It goes in. It's gorgeous. He shoots it at a really high clip, at a good volume. He can really fly. He can get up and dunk. He's got a nice little mid range game. He's got the ability to impact the game on both sides of the ball defensively, rebounding the basketball. And then similarly with Jaden Henley, he can put the ball in a basket. He can get after it defensively. These two guys on Exhibit 10s, we mentioned Danis Jenkins was a guy on a two-way. Look, I think these two guys, don't be surprised if they go Exhibit 10 to two-way to standard. Keep an eye on both of those guys. They also added Roddy Gale on a summer league deal. Um, they brought in Orlando Thomas on a summer league deal, and then Drake Allen on an Exhibit 10. Drake Allen, interesting player out of Utah State as well. But the two guys I would highlight, Jaden Henley and Corey Stevenson. I want to watch those two guys with the Buko Corey and Ugana Onyenso in summer league. Keep an eye on Detroit summer league team. Keep an eye on the Pistons in this offseason. They're not done making moves either. They're going to be active, and I'm liking what I'm seeing so far from Detroit. Continuing to chug along here, uh, is an opportunity for us to talk about the Toronto Raptors. Shout out to the Toronto Raptors. They just continue to do their thing, man. One of my favorite drafts as well. Not sexy, but damn, does it fit perfectly. Damn, is it two great picks. Alan Graves at 19 fits them to a T. He's going to fit in seamlessly with all the 6'8", 6'9", 6'10" guys that they have. He fits right in there. Positionless basketball that they've got going on over there. Alan Graves is going to fit in tremendously. I love me some Colin Murray Boyle. Scotty Barnes, obviously can't say enough about him. They've got some really fun players. We could go down the list. But then a second round pick, I want to give a lot of love to Jaden Bradley. Toronto's been doing this thing, man, dating back to the Masai Ujiri days. Whether it was Fred Van Fleet, Jamal Shed recently still in a team. Definitely a player worth talking about. And then obviously, it goes without saying they've been able to develop these sort of players and identify these sorts of players that get drafted later than they should. Shout out Jaden Bradley, man. Jaden Bradley's going to fit right in there. Jaden Bradley can roll out there game one of the NBA season, come off the bench, contribute for them. He's a dog, man. Big 12 player of the year, and this is a conference that had the top two picks in the draft. Jade Bradley's a McDonald's All-American, so it's not like he's your typical four-year guy. He's been talented for a long time. He's been around the block. He's a big shot taker. He's a big shot maker. He's athletic. He's going to get after you defensively. That's where he's going to make his bread and butter in the league. That's where he's going to get his initial minutes is on defense. But don't sleep on the two-way ability of him offensively as well. But he's a bulldog, man. He's going to get after you. He's athletic. Toronto adding two players perfectly into the DNA of what they've been continuing to build. They also brought in Namari Burnett from Michigan on an Exhibit 10, Nate Biddle on an Exhibit 10, and then Malik Thomas out of out of Virginia, and Jalen Celestine, both of those guys on summer league deals. Nate Biddle and Namari Burnett, two really interesting players on Exhibit 10s. Namari Burnett, big part of that championship team with Michigan. He can shoot, he can defend. Nate Biddle, very productive 7-footer, can stretch the floor and shoot it. There's been a lot of guys in that similar cloth, and he's one of them. He's an interesting one to monitor. But Toronto, man, they just continue to just consistent, rock solid. They know what they like. They identify it. They go out and they get it. San Antonio, man, honestly, one of my favorite drafts, if not my favorite as well. Almost 3 hours in. Listen, San Antonio, man, we talked about OKC, the rich get richer. San Antonio, we talk about picture and saying, oh, you got not only one, but two, but three. At pick 20, you go out, you get Jaden Quaintance. I mean, perfect pick for them. If there was ever a team that could develop him and be patient with him, if you never watched Jaden Quaintance, man, I mean, he pops off the screen. I mean, you're like, man, I want to see what this dude can do. He's a massive human being. only 18 years old. I think they'll be incredibly cautious with him rehabbing his injury. We'll see if he plays in summer league or not. I wouldn't be surprised if he doesn't. But if he does, I'd love to see that. But look, you want to talk about a team that can afford to develop and take their time with a guy like a big like this. Forget Wemby. Like this dude is a legitimate big. I mean, shit, you could play him and Wemby together. Then you go out one of the other trades that we mentioned. This is a guy we mentioned like Zubi Ejiofor, those sort of guys. We're so happy to see this guy get drafted in the first round. Terrace Reed. Denver trades down. We mentioned Denver apron team. They don't want to spend the money on that first round draft pick. So Denver drops down from 26 to 35, which I'll talk about Denver right after San Antonio because I love what Denver did as well. Uh, so Denver trades down from 26 to 35. Denver gets 35 and two future second round picks. This is a win-win trade for both teams, in my opinion. Denver saves a little bit of money. They get Trayvon Brazil, who we'll talk about, two future second round picks. But yeah, San Antonio, man, you get Jaden Quaintance on your own. You're thinking, hey, that's a pretty good day. If they would have not taken Quaintance and they would have taken Terrace Reed at 20, that's a really good day. They get both of those guys. Say less, man. Terrace Reed Jr. We mentioned a guy like Reno on the Kings. Terrace Reed, they're two totally different players. But Terrace Reed, man, I think game one, Terrace Reed comes off the bench for the Spurs. Shit, the Spurs could have used Terrace Reed against the Knicks in the finals, man. Terrace Reed's going to make an immediate impact. He was born to play for the Spurs. Just a really rock solid, good player, man. The rich get richer. I can't believe that the Spurs got this dude. And the fact they got both of these guys. Then on top of it, they add another big guy in Malik Brown, who we mentioned Ruben Chinyelu might have been the best defensive player, one of the best defensive players in college basketball this past season. A lot of other guys we mentioned, like, we go down the list. I mean, we haven't even got to my guy, Dylan Mitchell. I can't wait to spread Dylan Mitchell propaganda, man. But yeah, look, Malik Brown, you get Quaintance, Terrace Reed, and Malik Brown. Look, Malik Brown to me, we kind of talked about it. They're different players, but like the Dylan Cardwell at Auburn did not average a whole lot, and he got a standard deal because what he does on the defensive end. Malik Brown, they're different players, but similar in the sense that the statistical averages will be the same. And Malik Brown does some things defensively that pop off the page and make you go, holy smokes. So he was born. Look, they got all three of those guys, and then two picks before Malik Brown. It goes without saying, Jacoby Gillespie. They could have used Jacoby Gillespie in the finals against the Knicks two-man. Jacoby Gillespie is a bucket. Jacoby Gillespie is going to fit in perfectly. He's a guy people are going to say, how the hell did the Spurs get him at 42 in a couple of months when the season starts? You heard it here now. Jacoby Gillespie, 42, absolute fucking baller, man. Love watching him play. He's a microwave scorer, and he's gonna fit in perfectly in San Antonio. They've got the size and the defensive ability, to play around him. And you don't play for Rick Barnes if you can't play defense. Jacoby Gillespie can get after you defensively. Don't let his size and stature fool you. He is a two-way force, but he is a dynamo on the offensive end. He is a bucket getter. He fits in perfectly with San Antonio. The fact that they got all four of those guys, one of, if not the best drafts, and they were in the NBA Finals. The rich get richer. Unbelievable. On top of that, in the undrafted sphere, San Antonio, they go in, and to my knowledge, they have only added guys on summer league deals so far. Tyon Grant Foster, Miles Barnstable, and Henry Wessels. Big shout out to Tyon Grant Foster, man. This is a guy who had a heart condition, heart problem, almost, forget basketball. You fear for his life. Tyon Grant Foster, man, such a good story. Great to see him get cleared. Uh, Listen, whether he makes it to the league or not, he's already won. Look forward to watching this dude at summer league. I think, look, he's a good player, man. Don't sleep on him. Uh, Good, fun player, man. And I'm rooting for him, rooting for Tyon Grant Foster. Continuing down the list here, uh, Philadelphia. They end up with LeBaron Philon Jr. I was a bit surprised that he fell, but in the deep draft, someone was going to fall. That's a great example of best player available sort of deal for them on their board. Bob Myers and the whole deal with Bob Myers consultancy, bringing in the new front office. Uh, Gone is Daryl Morey. Hey, you get LeBaron Philon. I want to see LeBaron Philon in summer league. He's a good player, man. Um, only draft pick from Philadelphia that they made, LeBaron Philon, but it's a good pick. And then in addition, you come in here. Um, they added a couple guys. They had Duke Miles on an Exhibit 10. Nice little guard from Vanderbilt, productive player. Isaac Johnson from Hawaii on a summer league deal. Javante Campbell out of Bowling Green, great defender, gets in passing lanes. They bring him on a summer league deal as well. And then Armani Lyles, they bring him on a summer league deal as well. So all in all, I like the LeBaron Philon pick from Philly. You plug them in. Obviously they got a lot of guards already. With Maxey and Edgecombe, but I think LeBaron Philon Jr. is a good player, and I'm interested to see what he can do in Philly and how he kind of fits into that team. Being able to maybe play on and off the ball a little bit. Going back to that Knicks and Lakers deal, we talked about the Knicks. So they end up with Jack Kyle, and then at 47, the Knicks end up with Tyler Nickel. Tyler Nickel, again, I hate to use the term 3 and D, but listen, Tyler Nickel can shoot the crap out of the basketball. It's a great pick at 47. He can really shoot it. The Lakers, man, they got one of my guys at a draft, Cam Carr at 24. And the fact they only needed to give up cash considerations for Cam Carr, you do that 50 million times out of 100. You figure out the fit later. Look, Cam Carr is a baller, man. I want to see how he'll be able to fit. Obviously, with a guy like Luca and Reeves, and then we'll see what happens with LeBron. The ball is going to be in their hands a lot, but do not sleep on Cam Carr, man. Can't wait to see what this dude does at the California Classic and in Summer League. Cam Carr, great pick by the Lakers. I love me some Cam Carr. He could do everything, man. He can shoot, he can defend. He's a three-level scorer. He can get to the foul line, limitless range. I think Cam Carr, man, the Lakers got JJ Redick and company got to find a way to get this dude on the floor immediately. I think whatever success they have, not only this season but moving forward, I think Cam Carr is going to be a big part of it if they develop him right and they do him right, let him loose and let him play and don't. Look, I get it. You got Luca and AR and maybe LeBron and all that, but Cam Carr can play. Let him go out and do his thing. And I think you got a really good player, man. In addition to that, the Lakers go in and shout out to them. They made a couple of good undrafted signings as well. They got my guy from Robbie Avila, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar on an Exhibit 10. I'm excited to see what he can do. Um, so they add him on an Exhibit 10. They add my guy Robert McCray on an Exhibit 10. They add my guy William Kyle, who's a rim protecting big, on an Exhibit 10. Peter Suter on a two-way. Jakari White on a summer league deal. Chase Ross on an Exhibit 10, and then Akio Kuriki on a two-way. Very active. So I like this. I think Akio Kuriki on a two-way, I was a bit surprised that they gave him a two-way and not one of those other guys. It's not a disrespect to AKO Kerricky. I like some of these other guys a lot, whether it's a Robert McCray or Robbie Avila. But that doesn't mean that AKO Kerricky's not a good player. He's got good positional size. He can defend. He can shoot. He's a big boy. So I think AKO Kerricky on a two-way. I see that. Peter Suter, man. Peter, look, I know Austin Reeves went from undrafted to the largest contract for an undrafted guy in history. I'm not saying Peter Suter is Austin Reeves. I don't like player comparisons, but there's a blueprint there, and I think Peter Suter's got a pretty similar skill set. He can really fill it up offensively. Again, I mentioned Rick Barnes. Rick Barnes knows defense. Rick Barnes knows guys on offense that give you a headache as a defensive coach. He's saying the praises of Peter Suter, just like I mentioned Rick Pitino and Jalen Sellers. Listen, Peter Suter can play. So if you don't believe me, listen to Rick Barnes. But listen, Robbie Avila, if he finds his way onto the Lakers, it's going to be a fan favorite, man. such a fun player to watch. And then don't sleep on Robert McRae and William Kyle, too, two guys from the ACC, two guys that have kind of bounced around a little bit in their collegiate careers. William Kyle is a rim protecting athletic big, and then Robert McRae kind of as an athletic guard who can kind of get into passing lanes. He can facilitate, get after it defensively as a point of attack defender. I think. Shout out to the Lakers, man. We'll see how these guys fit. Cam Carr to me, can't say enough good things about Cam Carr. I try to say that as objectively as possible as well. And I think my thoughts on Cam Carr before the draft speak for itself. We mentioned Denver. Trayvon Brazil, they add him in the second round, but it wasn't just him. They also add my guy Bryce Hopkins at 49. So happy to see him get drafted after what he went through in his college career with injuries and whatnot. But just a really productive player, man. He can score the basketball. He knows his game. He's a really fun player to watch. And then also in the undrafted sphere, Denver goes in, gets my guy Aaron Kruma. They bring him in on an Exhibit 10. Do not be surprised if Aaron Kruma finds his way on a two-way and a standard deal. I thought if he would have gotten drafted, I would have had no problem with that. He could have been drafted in the 30s, and I would have had no problem for that. For him to go undrafted, I'm sure is a little bit of a bummer for him for sure. But listen, you just want a foot in the door. He's got the Exhibit 10. Go out and prove me right, young fella. In summer league, I think Aaron Kruma is a guy to look out for. He's going to make the Nuggets. And then an intriguing one out of East Carolina, Giovanni Emedru, a guy who averaged almost a double-double this past season for East Carolina. Um, we'll see what happens there, but somebody to keep an eye on just because he's one of those guys who maybe falls through the cracks in the way that a lot of publications might talk about the draft. But on an Exhibit 10, he's got a foot in the door. And then Mark Mitchell, too, on an Exhibit 10. Mark Mitchell was a guy, wouldn't have surprised me if he got drafted and he didn't get drafted. So another one of those maybe similar surprise, not, surprised he didn't get drafted, maybe not even a two-way. But I think Mark Mitchell and Aaron Kruma, those two guys at least, and then maybe even Giovanni Emedru. Don't be surprised. I would say Mark Mitchell and Aaron Kruma. Don't be surprised if those guys end up on a two-way, man. Uh, Also, we mentioned Cleveland with Malik Thomas. That's going to be one of the steals of the draft, in my opinion. Malik Thomas got all the confidence in the world. He's got a great offensive ability. I was really surprised that Malik Thomas did not get drafted any higher than what he did. Cleveland also goes in to add Savion Lee on an Exhibit 10. Trayvon Spillers on a summer league deal, and then Rayshawn Agee on an Exhibit 10. Rayshawn Agee is a guy, I feel like he was in college for about 50 years. I remember the Bowling Green team with him and Marcus Hill, and I think that was about 2-3 years ago when that happened. So, shout out to Rayshawn Agee. That is a big man. He's a huge human. He can really rebound and rim protect. Trayvon Spillers is a fun player too. Xavier Lee, interested to see what I think he's got confidence. He can be an NBA player. Well, young fella, now's your opportunity to go out in summer league. But the Malik Thomas pick, they got Jalen Tyson as a steal a couple of years back. Totally different players, but I think Malik Thomas going to a team like Cleveland, man, they're going to be able to take their time with him, develop him, and given the fact that they're pretty hard capped in the apron, it's about as talented of a player as you could ask for at 34. So for them to be able to get him is one of the steals of the draft, in my opinion, without a doubt. Continue to move along here. Boston, man. Boston, we're over 3 hours in, and Boston to me had arguably one of my favorite, if not my favorite draft. They only took two guys, but the two guys they got, again, I mentioned, it's like, man, you get one, not only one, but both. They got Chris Sinak Jr. at 27, and then you go in and get Dylan Mitchell in the second round, and you get Dylan Mitchell at pick 40. Those two dudes are going to be fucking menaces for people starting in summer league onwards. I want to see those two dudes play together, man. Christian Jr.'s got about as high of a ceiling as anybody in the entire draft. What he's able to do with his size, shooting ability, defense, length, and athleticism. He's got a really high ceiling, too. Do not sleep on him. If he ends up being one of the steals of the draft, we look back 5, 10 years and you say, man, how the hell did they get him? And then same thing with Dylan Mitchell, man. Dylan Mitchell to me, I'm going to continue to say it. I think Dylan Mitchell's the kind of guy. Look, his floor is already spectacular because his floor, he is going to be able to defend like hell. He is going to be one of the best defenders in the league, in my opinion. He is a human highlight reel. I implore anybody, if you've never watched Dylan Mitchell and you don't like college basketball and you don't want to go back and watch the college tape, watch the 2 days of the NBA draft combine and watch them both because, and I watched day two because the day two part speaks to the floor. 6 dunks, 6 for 6 from the field, and he had a dunk contest, man. All 6 of those dunks were things that'll make you go, oh, wow. And you'll make that exact or similar noise. And that's the floor. Just the ability to rim run, human highlight reel. Uh, like his floor is that. But I think his ceiling is a lot higher than anybody I've seen will talk about. Listen, man, you put the ball in this guy's hands, let him be a little point forward, let him facilitate, let him be a passer. I mean, he could be one of those guys, man. He could be a jack of all trades, triple double, all defense sort of dude. And I'm not even joking when I say that. That's his ceiling. The floor is all defense. Uh, dunk contest champion sort of deal. That's I listen. He is a human highlight reel. We mentioned Jade Bradley is a 4 year guy who it's not like he came out of nowhere. He's a highly recruited guy. Dylan Mitchell, same thing, highly recruited out of high school, but he's one of those guys. Credit to him, stays 4 years, and at St. John's under Rick Pitino started to show the ability to facilitate. He showed that at the combine as well. I want to see him in summer league. I want to see them put the ball in his hands. Don't be surprised if you see Dylan Mitchell on triple double watch at summer league. Him and Christian Act Jr. are going to be terrorizing people at summer league. I can't wait to watch that and be a part of it. Brad Stevens, one of the best executives in the league. They knocked that. That's an A+, man. I don't do draft grades, but you only get 2 draft picks, and those are your 2 guys. You can't ask for better draft picks than that. Shout out to the Boston Celtics for that. And then that also doesn't even account for the fact that on 2 Exhibit 10s, you're bringing in Tucker DeVries and Milos Uzan. Milos Uzan's a guy, if he would have gotten drafted, I would have had no qualms with that. Milos ends up on an Exhibit 10. Don't be surprised if Milos gets a 2-way, finds his way onto a roster. Milos is a winning player, man. He does a lot of really fun things. He's a good basketball player. Watch Milos Uzan make that team, and he's going to be able to play with his college teammate Christian Knight Jr. in summer league. And then Tucker DeVries, his dad is the head coach at Indiana. Tucker can really, he can shoot it. Good college scorer. But I think Milos Uzan, don't be surprised if Milos makes that team at some point, finds that Exhibit 10, kicks the door down. Really singing high praise for him. Phoenix traded in. We mentioned in one of those trades earlier. They made their only draft pick on the last pick of day one, last pick of the first round. They keep Koa Pete in state. It's a great pick. I like Koa Pete a lot. Him and Abuka Okori were 2 guys I couldn't believe where they were being projected. Abuka Okori goes 17, but Koa Pete ends up pretty much exactly where he was projected to go by other publications that are not the Unfiltered Report. Koa Pete, man, I like the pick a lot to keep him in the state. When it comes to Phoenix, Matt Ishbia and Phoenix, they're trying to be that. Kind of what we mentioned with Sacramento and the Adam Silver model, like, Miami before they got Giannis sort of deal. Like, they just want to be in the mix. They want to be competitive. They don't want to that's like maybe the ceiling isn't as high as some of these other teams. But with that said, don't forget that Phoenix got Rasheer Fleming and Kaman Malawach in the fold. I think both of those guys, I want to see them in summer league this year. I think they're both really talented, and I want to see how they build on their rookie years, and I want to see them seize this opportunity in summer league and try to make a big push for a bigger role. Phoenix just re-signed Mark Williams. Kaman Malawach is a guy I think could be their future starting 5. Again, don't sleep on Rasheer Fleming. He is a really good player. Kobe Bryant they got last year can really shoot it. Oso Iguodala and Ryan Dunn. They'll get Jalen Green healthy finally, so we'll see what they can do with the full year of Jalen Green healthy. Year 2 under Jordan Ott. They're going to be betting on internal improvement. Might be one of those cases where they're better this upcoming season, even if they don't finish as high as in the standings. But there's a lot left to be said from now until then. So save that prediction. But like, I see the incremental improvement. I see what they're trying to do. Um, they also Sam Hoiberg, Dad Fred's coach at Nebraska, used to be the coach of the Bulls. They bring in Sam Hoiberg on an Exhibit 10. And then I love seeing them give Corey Camper Jr. out of Nevada a shot on an Exhibit 10, see what he can do as well. But not a whole lot from Phoenix, but I do really like the Koa Pete pick. I think Koa Pete will surprise some people. I think Koa Pete's a great pick and a great player. We mentioned Houston traded up to 31. They got Bruce Thornton. They moved up 8 spots to get him. Bruce Thornton's a winning player, man. Bruce Thornton, 4-year captain. I wouldn't be surprised, if Bruce Thornton carves out a role off the bench pretty immediately for the Houston Rockets. He's one of those guys you want on your team. In addition to that, they also bring in Quadir Copeland. Quadir Copeland's a really fun defensive player. He can facilitate. They brought him in. They bring him, and I'm excited to see how that plays out. So again, Quadir Copeland on a two-way, and then Oscar Clough on a summer league deal. But I like Quadir Copeland and Bruce Thornton, getting them into the fold with the limited opportunities that they had. Really in the draft, as far as draft capital, they did the best that they could. Um, Other teams that we have not talked about so far, Indiana Pacers. They made the trade with Chicago. They traded Cam Jones and a couple of other things to Chicago. We mentioned that they end up with Braden Smith. Braden Smith gets to stay in the state of Indiana. Braden Smith's going to be a fan favorite for the Pacers. He fits in perfectly there. I mean, I'm not into player comparisons. They don't even play the same way. But TJ McConnell's been a fan favorite. Like Braden Smith kind of fits in that similar realm. All-time leading assist guy in the history of college basketball. He's got a pretty large wingspan too for a guy his size. He can get after it defensively. He can score the basketball better than you might think. Just a true point guard. He's the guy. You dream of playing with a point guard like that. He's going to fit in perfectly with the Pacers. Indiana also, they bring in Cape Keita on an Exhibit 10 and Kawasi Reeves Jr. and Rink Mast on Exhibit 10s and Taman Lipsey. I love the fact that they got Taman Lipsey and Braden Smith, two of the best college point guards. The fact they got not only one, but both. Wouldn't surprise me to see Taman Lipsey maybe find a way to kick that Exhibit 10, get a two-way. Cape Keita and Kawasi Reeves Jr. as well, Rink Mast. All four of those guys are going to be duking it out. And then Jalen Worley on a summer league deal. All four of those guys is going to be like the Hunger Games, man, because all four of those guys that can make the case to you. I mentioned Kawasi Reeves Jr. before. He's got a really unique game, but he's a fun player to watch. Cape Keita's a big man. He's a huge dude. Can really rim protect, athletic. Rink Mast, stretch big, was a big part of Nebraska's success this season. So all in all, I mentioned the Zubac trade. Clippers are super thrilled about that. But Indiana's obviously, if Zubac plays well, it's a high price to pay, but they'll be happy. But no team will be happier than the Clippers to get Keaton Wagler out of that. So they're going to be hoping it's a win-win. But yeah, Braden Smith going to fit right in. And then the fact they got not only him, but then Taman Lipsey undrafted and those other guys. I want to see which one of those guys maybe finds a way onto a roster. We mentioned Miami. We mentioned them, with Conwell and Keyshawn Big Guard Hall. We talked about OKC and San Antonio. We talked about Brooklyn, Orlando. We touched on them. Isaiah Nelson, new head coach Sean Sweeney. Isaiah Nelson's a really good player, man. I want to see what he can do. He fits into what they like to do, but I want to see how Sean Sweeney kind of adapts their style of play. Are they gonna be able to have more of a? Are they gonna be able to still be solid defensively, but have a little bit of a higher ceiling because they're gonna be able to score the ball a little bit better? That's gonna be the big question mark with Sean Sweeney and the tacticality of it. Jamal Mosley goes to New Orleans. which is a good opportunity for us to plug in New Orleans. New Orleans is one of those fascinating teams. I think we're going to need more time to talk about New Orleans. They really fascinate me. You go through their roster, they got some good players, man. I mean, it goes without saying. I mean, Trey Murphy's been in trade rumors for feels like forever, but there's a reason why they don't trade him because he's a good player, man. I think Trey Murphy's an all-star level player. Um, Trey Murphy, man. Every time I watch Trey Murphy, I think to myself, man, this guy's gonna break out and be a phenomenal player. Um, and he's really close to that. Jeremiah Fears had some really good performances for them at the end of the year, especially Derek Queen showed a lot of flashes. They gave up a lot to get him, but he's shown a lot of ability, especially as a passer. Herb Jones, a great player. DeJounte Murray, good to see him healthy. Zion, obviously, you want to see him healthy. Uh, you got on the list. It's a fun team. Sadiq Bey had his best year probably as a pro. He had some really good games. Um, they got talented players. You just want to see what they can do. Trey Alexander is a guy I've been a big fan of for a long time. He's been kind of on that two-way bubble for a long time, but I think he's got a lot of talent. With Jamal Mosley, I think, look, maybe their floor raises up and they find a way to grind at it defensively. I just worry similarly with the ceiling, as we've talked about with some of these teams, but it's not for lack of talent. But that's going to be the big thing with Jamal Mosley and company is can Jamal Mosley find a way to have them buy in defensively and maybe raise their floor, but then can Jamal Mosley find a way to get more out of them offensively, which raises his and the team ceiling? That will be the big question. And then, what happens with Trey Murphy, Herb Jones? I mean, I'm sure the price point is super high for a reason. They go in though, 58th pick. I think it's a steal. Also, the first player that the Pelicans have ever drafted that was born in New Orleans, Jaron Pierre Jr. Shout out to him. He's a great player. He can really fill it up. He's athletic. He can score the ball. Can't wait to see what he can do. Um, in addition to that, they go in, they bring in a guy in Jordan Riley from East Carolina, led the country in scoring, was at the top of the list this past season. Um, he was filling it up, man. Jordan Riley. Just to put it in perspective here, Jordan Riley, sorry, he was second in the nation in scoring. I didn't mean to say AJ DeBonsa led the country in scoring. Darius Acuff was third. Shout out to my guy PJ Haggerty in fourth. Deshaun Ruffin was fifth, and then Nabucco Corey was seventh, and then Dominique Daniel was at sixth. Shout out to Dominique Daniels and Jordan Riley, and shout out to the Pelicans in a sense because the Pelicans they bring in Dominique Daniels and Jordan Riley. It's a bit unclear what type of contract Jordan Riley signed, but I'll be able to come and update that. I don't know if it's a um, I don't know if it's an Exhibit 10 or if it's just a summer league deal, but they also bring in Dominique Daniels Jr. Uh, he's a really fun player to watch too, man. If you watched him in the tournament against Kansas, or even before that, long before that, pound for pound, he can really fill it up, man. Whatever happens with him in his career, I think he'd be a guy who'd be a high level G League player at the very least. But listen, Dominique Daniels can score. Jordan Riley can score. I love that they brought in Melvin Council Jr. on an Exhibit 10, to be honest with you. And they also brought in Solomon Washington on an unknown deal and Sean Phillips Jr. Uh, on a summer league deal. But I think Melvin Council Jr., don't be surprised if he finds his way onto that roster in some capacity. That dude's a baller, man. Love watching him play. I think that'll be a guy he's gonna get my stamp of approval. And then I want to see what happens with Jordan Riley and Dominique Daniels, regardless of what happens with their pro careers, whether they make it to the league or not. They deserve a lot of love. Two dudes who can really put the ball in the basket. But I think Melvin Council Jr.'s got a great shot to make that team. I can't wait to see him, Jerron Pierre Jr., and all these guys duke it out together. Um, I believe if there are any teams that I've missed, we talked about Atlanta, we talked about Brooklyn, we talked about Boston, Charlotte, Chicago, Cleveland, Dallas, Denver, Detroit, Golden State, Houston, Indiana, the Clippers, the Lakers, Memphis, Milwaukee, Miami, Minnesota, New Orleans, the Knicks, OKC, Orlando, Philly, Phoenix. We talked about We talked about San Antonio, Sacramento, Toronto. We've talked a lot about Utah and the Wizards, and that just leaves one team that we have not talked about, which is the Portland Trail Blazers. Almost 3.5 hours in. I'm just gonna make this with the Blazers. I'm gonna set it up for that future episode, like I mentioned. Um, Portland didn't have any draft picks. They only added one guy so far, Barry Dunning Jr. on an Exhibit 10. So I'll come in here and update their summer league squad as that gets closer and who they end up adding on what type of contracts. Um, we've talked a bit about Tom Dundon. Tom Dundon, the least popular man in the NBA right now. And he's digging that hole deeper and deeper by the day. Um, we talked about how there were some rumors that they were going to offer under slot coaching deals, and that ended up being uh, Micah Nori. We talked about him. I thought he was going to be a guy who was going to get one of these open jobs. Turns out that he does. The caveat is that his contract includes only one guaranteed year with team options on the second and third years, and it's a below market based salary with incentives based on team success. JB Bickerstaff, the president of the NBA Coaches Association, called it a slap in the face to our value, which a lot of coaches expressed that. Chris Finch came to bat for Micah Nori. Micah Nori himself, uh, Micah Nori said, "Hey, you know what? Uh, I like what Micah Nori said. Micah Nori said, "Hey, you know what? These jobs are hard to get. I've interviewed for a lot of these. I've come in second a lot of times. I've bet on myself throughout my career. I really don't care what they pay me or how many years it is. I believe that I'll be able to do with my success, that'll speak for itself and that'll take care of itself. So I love the mindset from Micah Nori. I think he's going to have a lot of success. I think he'll be able to keep them afloat, and I think he'll get a second year, most likely. He's a good coach. I think he's been angling for this for a long time. But the Tom Dundon piece of it, man, this guy continues to dig himself a deeper hole. But the one thing I want to talk about with Tom Dundon, man, we got to give some love to the Portland people. And I don't know any Blazers fans. I'd love to get some of them on here because, man, when it comes to Portland, I mean, I think it's one of those sad things where you're already seeing it. Owners threatening to the writing is there to where if people aren't careful and they don't, and this is what I want to set up with the episode that we're gonna do with the next one solo. Um, when there's no pushback to things and you let things happen, it's sad, and sometimes there is pushback, and it happens anyways. But I want to stand up for the people of Portland. I want to stand up for the I want to, what I don't want to kowtow to anybody and be somebody that I'm not. I don't want to do it disrespectfully, and that's maybe something that I've struggled to do on the record is find a way to talk about these things without being disrespectful, but by also shedding, shedding light to power and talking about some of the unjust things that go on behind the scenes. And one of those things we've talked about it in the past, and we're going to set it up. With, for example, with stadiums, and you've got these billionaires, some of the richest people on the planet, and instead of them paying for stadiums, it's the public, it's the taxpayers that pay for it instead, which has always been bullshit to me. I've always been of the opinion that if and I'm going to continue to bang this drum. I think if you want taxpayer money going into your stadium and you're not going to pay that money, then the taxpayers should own that team and not you. And so the people of Portland should all own that team, and Tom Dundon shouldn't. He's going to threaten to move them out of Portland if Portland and their politicians don't acquiesce and bend over, and either the Portland politicians will bend over or they won't. Or if they don't bend over, Tom Dundon will say, "All right, well, I'm going to take this team somewhere else." And it's the people that get fucked. Politicians and billionaires go hand in hand a lot of times. We're going to talk about that. Um, it's you got to stand up for the people, man. And I hope the people of Portland see this and they hear this and they stand up for it. Look, if they're going to try and take you for a ride, that's your team. You become the owners of that team. Stand up, fight for your team, fight for your city. I know not every, and you know what? Not everybody in Portland gives a fuck about basketball, and they have to pay for the fucking stadium. Think about that too. Um, but look, Portland, when they're good, it's one of the best environments in the league. Some of my favorite teams over the years have been Portland teams. I've always felt that they've had one of the nicest jersey combos in sports. Um, they've had some of my favorite teams over the years, whether, it's the Jailblazers, the Dame Lillard, LaMarcus Aldridge, CJ McCollum renditions. This current iteration, I want to see what they can do as well. They're one of those, maybe the ceiling's not super duper high, but the floor is there. We've talked about some of these teams. But I want to see what they can do with a full crack at it, and I want to see what they can do in Portland. Portland's a great place. Shout out to the old Rose Garden. I know it's the Motor Center now, but shout out to the Rose Garden. Um, I know that they want to do renovations and maybe a new arena, and Tom Dundon wants the people to pay for it. And Tom Dundon's everybody's public enemy number one, but I think that's the one where there's a lot of things that are really fucked up. Whether it's look, it's one thing to cut costs and whatnot, but it's another thing to fuck people and everyday people. Um, and so I hope it sets up our next solo episode that we'll do here. It'll probably be just as long as this, if not longer. And what I want to say is that it's not to say that Tom Dundon is a bad dude. I don't know the guy. We came on here and we did that episode not too long ago, and we connected the dots between him and the Hurricanes. And I actually said, like, hey, he's the most hated guy in the league, but like, let's give him a little bit of a chance to build a team in Portland, and let's see what happens. And that if there's some bullshit that we have to call out, we'll do it. And that's what we're doing here. I think the people gotta, I want to see the people own that team, if anything, if they try to do all that. Portland's a great. I would love to get some Blazers fans on here and see what they have to think about Tom Dundon. Obviously, his Hurricanes just won the championship and they won the Stanley Cup Finals. Um, and Portland can have some success. But you know what? I think the truth is always somewhere in the middle, and I think it's a great example. So I want people to be able to make their own conclusions, talk about it as well, respectfully, with no hard feelings to anybody. We don't hate anybody here at the Unfiltered Report. We want to spread peace and love. So I listen to anybody that took the time to listen to this 3.5 thing. There was a lot that we didn't even talk about, if you could believe it. There's so much more forecasting the offseason we didn't really get a chance to do. But stay tuned. We got more World Cup coverage. We have got, again, we're going to talk about the NHL draft as best we can and that offseason. Some big moves in Major League Baseball. We didn't even get to recap the college baseball championship. Congrats to the Oklahoma Sooners for winning the championship. We'll talk a little bit about college baseball, the MLB draft. Part of the MLB stuff will fit into this long-edged episode that we're alluding to. But listen, to the people out there, can't thank you enough. Love you all greatly. This one's for the basketball degenerates, baby, for the sporting degenerates. Cheers to the best to come. Have a great weekend. Stay tuned for more, especially from the stars of the Unfiltered Report, are going to be joining us in due order. Cheers and much love.